know what I've wanted to do for a while? Make content on YouTube again. What kept me from doing it till now? Practically everything. One of the big ones was how I never found the time. Deadlines always seemed to creep up on me when I was least expecting them. But it took one of my roommates buying me a whiteboard to hang up on my door for me to realize that everything I have on my daily schedule doesn't actually take that long to do. So thanks to some, not insignificant optimization, now I have several hours every day that can be devoted to this. But that still doesn't address the biggest problem: motivation. See, we're in the middle of Adpocalypse 3.0 Baby Elsa and Spider-Man Killer Clown Funny Story Edition right now, and it only seems like horrible things will keep happening to this platform. Partly because of bad actors, and partly because of Google's hands-off approach itself. Never mind that my Twitch channel has been doing better for me lately than YouTube ever was, so yeah, that kinda kills my spirits a bit. But it's also because I feel like I'm lacking the reason I wanted to do this in the first place. Because it's fun. I look back on some of my old RTGs episodes, or my top 8 Kirby copy abilities video, where I was doing wacky stuff and making random jokes just because I thought they were funny. And I remember how much I enjoyed seeing those projects come together and watching people's positive reactions. And in the wake of that, I'm just left sitting here and thinking, why am I not making videos like that anymore? The games are still there, but I've lost the joy. I somehow managed to lose my way on a platform of my own creation, and I think it's about time I right the ship. I'm gonna use December for this purpose, in something I basically stole from Kadikarus. I'll be making one video a day in December, every day up until Christmas, each focusing on one of my favorite games of all time. I know people usually save this for milestones or celebrations, but in my case, I'm using it as a new beginning. A way of getting me back in the swing of producing regular content again, yes, but also of returning to my roots, and reminding myself why I'm doing this to begin with. Couple ground rules here. These games will be presented in no particular order, with the exception of the final 8. Those I am pretty dang confident about their position at the top of my list. Also, fuck the one game per franchise rule. Look, real talk. Even in the days of Peanut 3423, that was a stupid limitation to put on yourself and everybody knew it. It's not my fault if one franchise, or even one game in that franchise, just happens to have all the best music or the most awesome boss fights. I just tell it like it is, don't shoot the messenger. And that's especially important to establish for this list because I also can't change how I feel. No matter how personal the reason, the games you will see me talk about over the next 25 days mean something really important to me. Something that drives me to discuss them in detail and sing their praises to anyone that'll listen, in the hope that at least some of you will try them out yourselves and have an experience even remotely close to mine. That's all this is. I'm not here to try and rewrite the book on what history will remember as the best games ever made, because the only perspective I can speak from is my own. In my little world, these games are the best, and through replaying them, my fingers are crossed I'll find the drive once again to go out and hunt down new classics to love. That's the beauty of this. This is something I want to do every year, because I know this list will change. New games will get made, and chances are I'll play some older ones too that will blow my mind all over again. It's an exciting time for me, and hopefully for you too. So without further delay, I'm Whatthefnu, and this is the 25 Games of Christmas. Freedom Planet is caught in a really interesting situation right now, because one of its biggest praises when it originally came out was that it was the best Sonic game we'd gotten in years. That is no longer true. Mania and Forces were both amazing for the same reason. They appeal to people already lost in the fan base. Mania revels in nostalgia without forgetting to actually learn from those games it's celebrating and improve on them in every possible way, while Forces is the more official Twitter account and Christian side of that coin. It's intentionally as dumb as possible and doesn't pretend to be anything more. Like, if that line about modern Sonic having not seen classic Sonic for generations got a smile out of you, even if you're cringing at the same time, you're probably gonna like Forces. The point is, Sonic is back, which makes it even more amazing that in this day and age, Freedom Planet still stands out. That's because the devs didn't restrict the game to what it was inspired by. I mean, the DNA is still there, but they also put so much of themselves into it that it morphed into an idea and a world that could stand on its own two legs even after the niche it was originally meant to fill has gone back to normal. This is the golden Frieza of fan games, the true final form of a project born from love of someone else's work. It's peppy and beautiful and colorful all at the same time, but it's also incredibly good at both making you fall in love and breaking your heart. But forget about all that for a second. You know why I love this game? Because the planet in Freedom Planet feels like an actual place. There's a sense of scale to these areas, like you could stare off into the background and the landscape would go on forever. There's a defined sense of culture and history that pervades every element of these characters' lives. It shapes their buildings, their outfits, their entire existence. And this is in a platforming game. How? Believe it or not though, that's just the icing on the delicious purple cake that is this level design. Tons of stage elements to interact with, like ladders, ramps, loops, boost rings, moving platforms, handholds, walls to climb, barriers to break, and so much more. Keep you constantly interested in what's going on. You, as the player character, are the focus here. Everything in these stages is moving in response to you and how you interact with it, which makes you feel even more like you're a part of what's going on. I mean, for crying out loud, there's a disco ball in stage 3 that makes you dance if you idle in front of it. How cool is that? This is complemented by incredibly tight enemy and hazard placement that keeps you on your toes and working out the best way to move forward safely. Not necessarily quickly, though don't get me wrong, it's still satisfying to do that too. See, contrary to Sonic, these stages are just begging you to explore them, to stop and smell the flowers and maybe pick up a couple star cards along the way. And if you don't need the health from that flower, don't worry, it turns into more crystals towards another extra life instead. But my favorite part of the collectibles is that they don't feel heavy-handed. Nobody's holding an extra stage or a super form over my head if I don't grab all of them, and ironically, that makes me way more willing to seek them out on my own, because I don't feel like I'm being forced to. I'm not missing any important content if I don't grab every single one of these freaking things. It's just there if I want it. And that's something I wish I saw more of in games like this. No matter how you approach these levels though, you've got your pick of the litter when it comes to characters. If there's a Hall of Fame for excellent game mechanics, I nominate Lilac's Dragon Boost. It's like a spin dash you can do in any direction. It's an all-purpose tool for dealing massive damage, leaping to out-of-reach areas, and getting back your acceleration when you feel like going fast again. Combine that with her wicked combos of punches and kicks and the ever-satisfying Cyclone, and Lilac ends up having so much depth to her that, honestly, the jump to a fighting game wouldn't be too far of a stretch. And she's just one character. You get 3 of them. Also pick up the soundtrack because are you listening to this music right now? If I could be sustained by sound, I would eat this OST for lunch every freaking day. All these tracks are bouncing with irresistibly catchy hooks and melodies, or pumping with enough adrenaline and atmosphere to make you genuinely on edge. They're so well composed that talking over one of them right now honestly feels like I'm doing something wrong. Like, the character select theme is legitimately one of the best songs I've ever heard, and most people won't even be on that screen long enough to get to its best parts and realize how good it really is. Are you actually mad? Who goes through that kind of trouble? Layla Wilson? Steven Diduro and Shane Ellis of Galaxy Trail, that's who. I cannot sing this game's praises enough. It let me drive a motorcycle up walls, and that wasn't even the best part. It's got a sequel releasing next year, and you better believe I'm on the edge of my seat in anticipation. But on the off chance somebody working on that game is watching this, I do have one question. Really? A 20-minute cutscene? Come on, man. This game. My god, this game. I have done 3 full playthroughs of A Hat in Time casually, 1 on stream. I reviewed it, did more streams showcasing some of the workshop levels people have put together. I'm currently learning how to speedrun it, and yet, I still feel the exact same I did when I played it for the first time. No fatigue, no sense of boredom or dread, or even like I fully know what's going to happen. It is still just as satisfying to play again now as it was 2 months ago. I'm slowly coming to terms with the fact that I might have a problem. And the problem is I haven't played this game enough! I have so few precious experiences I can point to and say that they made me feel the way A Hat in Time does. So few games give me that childlike sense of wonder, that feeling of everything around you being wonderful and exciting and fresh and new. So few games that control as well as this does. So few games that manage to do that while also bursting with enough charm, heart, and soul that any complaint I could possibly levy against what's currently happening on screen feels downright petty. There's not a single cynical bone in this game's body. It's pure magic from beginning to end. The only reason I don't count it in my top 8 already is because the others have years of experience and reflection on their side. Tune in on the 18th to see why that matters so much. This game is happiness incarnate. It's a perfect storm of brilliant ideas that all come together to make you feel like a kid again. Like, there are games with good controls out there, but this is on a whole nother level. I actually prefer the way HatKid controls in this game to the way Mario controls in Odyssey. Yeah, I said it. Fight me. The jumping resides at the exact sweet spot between floaty and weighty, meaning you're always in the air long enough to land where you want without it being annoying. Not to mention the dive that you can do on land or in air, which can be used at any time, at any point, and can be fired off in any direction you like. Plus it comes with that little recovery roll at the end, just in case you need that extra boost to get where you're going. It actually reminds me a lot of Yoshi's Island, because all that hang time means you can not only adjust, but also experiment. You can try going places you might not have been allowed to, testing the boundaries of the world and the levels, which is fine because guess what? It's a collectathon. You're supposed to explore at your own pace and find your own solutions. And then you've got wall jumping, sliding, dive attacks. Combine it all with a passive power-up that lets you dive at a wall and not only not get stopped dead in your tracks, but also go straight into a wall run up and over the obstacle and mwah, 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 bellissimo, molto bene, amore mio. And they could have stopped there. That alone would have made this a good game in its own right. But good enough wasn't enough for developer Gears for Breakfast. And thank goodness, because they let you explore one of the most downright interesting worlds I have ever had the pleasure of poking my nose into. I am smiling ear to ear when I'm playing through these levels. Here's a question for those of you who have played A Hat in Time. What's your favorite stage and where is it in World 2? So many games these days brag about how gigantic their open worlds are, but I think most of them could benefit by taking a page out of this game's book and making sure every inch of that world is crawling with things to do and collectibles to find. that no matter which direction you're looking in, you'll see something interesting off in the distance. And that something is designed so well that even if you need a later power-up to get it, you can easily commit that to memory and come back later. And hey, I'll put up with backtracking if it lets me interact with this cast some more. This is some of the funniest, sharpest, and downright wittiest dialogue you'll ever find in the interactive arts. And it's delivered so well by voice actors that sound like they're having so much fun playing these characters that I can't help but fall in love with every NPC I meet. It's a tried and true strategy, the Earthbound principle, as I call it. If something is light and approachable, people are more likely to get attached. And once you accomplish that, it'll mean so much more when things finally do start getting serious. You go from jumping around in a pool of candy-shaped pillows in this game to a duel between what are essentially Time Lords. And in the middle, you'll find battling birds, holy mountains, and soul-stealing specters, all with their own unique stories to tell and adventures to share. And that's on top of the greater mysteries hidden in some of the less traveled nooks and crannies, the meaning of which are still being debated by avid fans. There's just so much to A Hat in Time. So much love, so much care and attention, and so much good music. Shoutouts once again to Plasma 3. This game is exactly what I needed right now, and if it's not remembered as a celebrated classic 10 years from now, there is truly no justice in this world. 3 words: Corgi Text Adventure. Thank you. Thank you. You never forget your first, do you? I remember my first pet, a dog named Tigger. I loved that scruffy little nerf herder. I remember my first console. It was the Super Nintendo. A thing defined my childhood. And I remember my first video game. It was called Beauty and the Beast. You were a white dot on a blue screen trying to avoid the hunters in a maze. Literally no one I've ever described this to has ever heard of it, including my parents who owned the computer, so if you have, please inform me in the comments so that I know I'm not insane. Most relevant to this video though, I remember my first Legend of Zelda game, and the emotional roller coaster that it took me on. You know, over on the Twitch channel, I pride myself on the fact that I actually pay attention to tutorials and am fairly decent at the games I'm showing off. But let me tell you, that was not always the case. My games were always bought used, and this was before the internet was widespread, so I had no manual, no game facts to turn to, no idea who this guy was or what he had done in the past, and ignorant to the fact that you had to use your shield to push the sea urchins out of the way so you could get your sword and actually begin the game. I owned this thing for 3 days before one of the other kids in my class sat me down and informed me of how dense I was. It's not my fault. That guy said a shield can flip enemies, not push them. Everything else bounces off when I merely touch it. How come these guys don't? Don't blame me, the game just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, this little island adventure was a struggle sometimes. Between the trade quest and how you obtained the ocarina, there were days where I just gave up and started my save file all over again so I could play through the parts I had already figured out. That's the only reason I know Link's Awakening like the back of my hand, because every new discovery was such a monumental event in my mind that it's etched into the folds of my brain for eternity. But I tell you what, the more I pressed on, and the more this world started opening up to me, the more motivated I became to, one day, see the end. This game was like a giant puzzle that I slowly pieced together by backing up and double-checking everywhere I'd been to see what changed, and I was addicted to what that process inspired in me. I must have dug up every single square on that island at least once, hoping a seashell would pop out. I used to look forward to seeing the owl again because his arrival meant either something important had happened or he needed to share something crucial with me. Plus, you know, owls are awesome. In fact, not a single NPC in this game felt like wasted space. Every single one of them was either part of the main quest, the trade quest, provided a useful service to you, or was just downright weird or had funny dialogue. And naturally, the more time I spent on this island with these interesting characters, the more I started to get attached to them. I used to be so intrigued by that mermaid just off the coast. I used to have an actual crush on Marin. Still do, to an extent. And I used to think Crazy Tracy was so pretty and so useful because she could save me from death for a mere 42 rupees. Basically, I was just really lonely as a kid. The girl in the real world that I was after wanted nothing to do with me, so I may or may not have projected on these characters a little bit, especially when one of them started returning my feelings. And of course, right around when I was getting attached, was when the game decided to pull the rug out from under me. That's right, sucker. We spent the first 6 chapters of the game getting you comfy and acquainted, only to reveal that nothing you did ever mattered. Because even in canon, Koholint Island isn't real. Neither are any of the people on it. And once you finish your quest, all of it will disappear. I remember how that felt clear as day. I was in actual denial over this revelation. I had convinced myself that everything was going to be okay in the end, that there's no way the developers would actually make that happen. And then I entered the Windfish's egg. There I was, lost in the darkness, trapped in an infinitely repeating maze. No Marin, no mermaid, not even any enemies to distract me from what I was looking at. Just the same repeating rooms over and over, with nothing but that simple and threatening music to keep me company. And that's when something in my brain just snapped. I had never felt so alone, so hopeless, so emotionally crushed. It's like I was seeing the true face of the island, and it was hollow and cold and empty inside. The game practically taunted me over how this was the only thing that was real, that all the ups and downs I had gone through before were now a lie. I couldn't take it at the tender age of 8. I started panicking, practically teared up over this. I didn't have a word for it at the time, but that was my very first experience with existential horror, and it left a mark. The music still freaks me out today for that very reason. But, like any other hardship this world threw at me, I overcame it. I got the magnifying glass, I found the book, I memorized the directions, and I conquered the nightmare. And once it was down, that was it. The Windfish woke up, Link was free, and the island was no more. And that's how it was for a while. For years, I didn't know what to feel when looking back on the game. But then I discovered a ray of hope. A hidden ending, something you could only see if you beat the game without dying once. And when I finished that playthrough, it changed everything. I was crying again, but this time, it's because I was happy. Never before or since have I been moved so much by a single little visual detail. That's why this game means so much to me. It's such a bittersweet part of my life. But, especially with that ending, I find myself focusing on the good more than the bad. The reason it hurts so much is because even if they weren't real, the memories are. I'm still here. I remember the time I spent with all these wonderful people, singing and playing and helping one another, and they're gone now. All save for one. And wherever she is, she's happy. I can't even say that without getting choked up a little bit. Oh God. This game changed me. It gave me an experience I will never forget for the rest of my life. I can't. I owe it to those guys. Yes, seriously. Y'all thought I was kidding when I said I liked idle games. Almost a hero, crusader of the lost idols, adventure capitalist, of course, and the absolute best of the bunch, Crush Crush. So get this, Crush Crush is an idle game dating sim. Your entire motivation for watching these numbers go up is getting closer and closer to several different women. That's weird, right? But it totally works because of one major factor. This is, hands down, the funniest game I have ever played. From the premise and the situations you'll find yourself in, to the random bits of dialogue you'll get when talking to these ladies, every single element of Crush Crush is there to serve its sense of humor, which effortlessly floats between being goofy, smart, and refreshingly blunt. Sometimes all three at once. Even if you think you know what you're getting into with this game and its characters, chances are they'll surprise you. And again, that's probably on purpose. Constantly defying the expectations I initially came in with is how Sad Panda Studios kept me coming back to this thing for over a year. Yes, a year! 12 months, 52 weeks, 365 days. I am this close to unlocking the final 2 love interests, and I ain't giving up now. And I'm having even more fun these days than when I started, all thanks to the events that they're holding. Basically, these are daily checklists encouraging me to come in every day and try my hand at claiming some pinup posters and alternate costumes, while I'm taking care of the fairly boring but necessary process of grinding out reset boosts. And yeah, okay, let's address the elephant in the room. You may have noticed I had to make some strategic edits to these portraits, which are odd in their inclusion if you don't play it on the same platform I do. See, there are actually 3 different versions of Crush Crush out there. The original release on Congregate, where I first discovered it, the Steam version, more like the steamy version, am I right? And what you're looking at here, Crush Crush Moist and Uncensored, which you can only play on a website called newtaku.net, and well, there goes my ad revenue for this video. Patreon.com/TeamPizza. Seriously though, play the Newtaku version if you can. It's way better. More scenes, more dialogue, more costumes, and, well, you know. I'm not even embarrassed that I pre-registered for this. Like, when they announced this on Congregate, I jumped ship immediately. And that's the cool part. No matter what you're into, you can enjoy this game. Explicit, safe, doesn't matter. You don't even have to play as a male character. Just head into the status screen whenever you want and customize your little marshmallow however you like. And what makes this just the best is that it is 100% free. You can go play Crush Crush right now in your browser for the low cost of jack squat. And I know what you're thinking now that I've said that, but don't worry, it's not one of those. There are no gacha boxes, no prompts bugging you to watch ads or anything agitating like that, and literally the only good thing diamonds can be used for anyway is buying costumes for the girls, and maybe getting more time slots to do activities with. However, the game is so generous with the premium currency that you won't feel the pressure to pony up until long past the point where you feel like they've earned it. And it's so clever with the rate at which you unlock the ability to do more things at once that it feels like an actual game mechanic more than a money-grubbing limitation. It's like a puzzle as you prioritize and figure out whether to sink your precious bars into hobbies, jobs, or event goals. The active part to balance out all the idle. And it makes it all the more rewarding every time you get more of them, because now it opens up even more options to you. And how do you get more diamonds and time blocks? By playing the game, by getting achievements, dating, giving gifts, and spending some quality time with the real stars of this show. Trust me, it's a game first and a way to generate revenue second. Which, interestingly enough, makes me want to give them money more. Actually, there's one more thing to use diamonds on. If you don't feel like logging in every day to get those event rewards, don't worry. They give you the option to just buy the rewards outright and be on your way. Even if you fail to gain enough event tokens to win them for free, keep at it. Every box you check off actually lowers the amount of diamonds it'll cost to outright buy the prize pack. That's so cool. I'm currently 2 marks short of getting these Christmas costumes, and I have no issues with going the buy my way to victory route, because I've gotten so much enjoyment out of Crush Crush that I'm honestly paying what I think the game is worth at this point. Less than that even. It's one of only 2 free-to-play games that I've ever spent real money on, the other being Elemental Wings on Android, which you sadly can't play anymore. Quality work deserves to be rewarded, and in this genre at least, I don't think you can do better. I love the music, I love the sound effects, I love the aesthetic, I love the bright and wacky personalities and how much there is to each and every one of them once you get to know them better. I love Elle. I just love everything about this character. The way her brain works is just fascinating to me. I like her so much that she's the only character I've bought the wedding dress costume for, and probably the only one I ever will. I love her hair, I love her color scheme, What was that? Oh god, no! You may have noticed by now that good music has been a running theme in these videos. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't expect that to change anytime soon. The subject of my favorite video game soundtrack is a whole nother can of worms that would require way more research than I can possibly commit to with daily uploads, but as of now, I can tell you that Chrono Cross is definitely a top contender in the category. I don't think there's a single bad song in this entire game. I don't even think there's an average one. It starts at great and just goes up from there. This shouldn't surprise anybody. I'm a musicophile, a melomaniac, and what you're seeing on screen is very likely one of the major reasons why. I watched this game's opening at an age where I was ready to be impressed by something, and holy wow did it deliver. The guitar, the flute, the drums, the violin. Oh my god, the violin. When I listened to the track known as Time's Scar for the first time, I knew I was in for something special. So if you haven't already, do yourself a favor and please listen to this soundtrack. Set aside some time, dim the room, light a few candles, and get ready for 3.5 hours of catchy melodies, sinfully sweet strings, and a trip to every single peak in the emotional spectrum. Oh, and the game is pretty good too. Turn-based RPGs are one of my favorite genres, especially when they're done right. And they got this game oh so right. When you want to attack an enemy, you don't just attack, you start a combo. You can chain together a string of light, medium, and heavy blows, all with a certain chance to hit. Weaker attacks are safer, but landing them first will increase the accuracy of all your other moves. But stronger attacks are way stronger than ones that are not. So if you just play it safe and do a full chain of light hits, you'll be missing out on a lot of potential damage. That's because you only have so much stamina to use on attacks, so winding up first means you can't do as much damage, but missing even one swing really hurts, especially if it was heavy and cost you 3 of your 7 bars to work with. Plus, landing any attack charges up your ability to cast magic spells, which are incredibly powerful and game-changing and can shift the tide of the entire fight, but also cost 7 stamina by themselves, meaning you can actually go into the negatives and have far less stamina to work with the next time your turn rolls around. It makes every single battle interesting because you're so invested in every single move. It's a system that makes natural drama unfold as the battle progresses, with all the highs and lows associated with pushing your luck in a tight spot, and the wistful dreams of those who played it safe. My absolute favorite aspect of Chrono Cross, though, is the playable characters. Pochol, Pierre, Raz, the ever-lovable kid, and so many more. There's a cast of over 40 people that could end up under your command, some of which are hidden behind their own little side quests and stories, and all of which feel like real people in this world. They have their own dreams, goals, motivations, special abilities, and unique quirk that they bring to the team dynamic. And get this, it's very likely you won't recruit them all. This is why I rag on other games in the genre so hard for having hollow dialogue trees. The choices you make in this game not only affect the progression of the story, but have drastic impacts on how your teammates perceive you. You could lose party members based on your decisions, not because they die or anything, but because they get fed up with you and just leave. And that's all inside a greater story about parallel worlds, ancient treasure, dragons, fairies, and political intrigue. And that twist, that freaking twist in the middle of the game that completely flips everything on its head. Criminidly. Well done, Squaresoft. GG. You know what the crazy part about all this adoration is? I've never beaten this game. I've never seen the end of its prequel either. But it doesn't matter. I am so lost in this world, so in love with what I've already experienced that I don't even need to see all of it to count it in my personal favorites. Not to say I don't ever want to experience it all. In fact, we'll be playing through it on the Twitch channel in 2018. But what I've seen so far leads me to believe that the last thing the second half of the game will be is awful. Especially if I get to hear more of this music. Yasunori Mitsuda, my dude. Will you marry me? My grandfather had so much influence on me as a child. He was my hero, no doubt. He inspired me with incredible stories about those magnificent men and their flying machines. His office was filled with tables covered in papers, and there was a massive world map on one of his walls. He and Nana used to take us to a place called Adventure City when we'd go to visit them in Anaheim, and he's also the person who introduced me to a little movie series called The Rescuers. All of this combined to give me a lust for adventure, specifically that old-timey aviator goggles and leather jacket kind. That flying a biplane with your scarf whipping in the wind behind you as you approach horizons unknown kind. It's why escapism is my favorite aspect of video games. But it's only half of why I like Renowned Explorers International Society as much as I do. Before it became a dedicated archive channel for my live streams, my alt channel, Team Pizza Plays, was where I posted a lot of Let's Play content, and one of our go-to games was this. I figured it's a roguelike. We could have played this game 100 times and still encountered new things. And then we did, and we were. We posted over 30 episodes of Renowned Explorers, and it never got boring once. But possibly the best decision I made for that series was to bring fellow Team Pizza members Drawman and Hidden in the Truth along for the ride. This is so special to me because I was an impossible shut-in as a kid. My sister was just about my only friend, and she didn't have a whole lot of interest in games. That changed when moving to Ohio. I got to play Magic. I got to roleplay with people for the first time. I got to experience all of this nerdy stuff that I had always wanted to, but never had the other people to pull off. So these are some of my few gaming memories I can point to and say I shared them with someone who was just as excited about what was going on as I was. We laughed, we joked, we argued over whether or not it was a good decision at the time to push our luck for the chance at some treasure. We all started to lose focus on the conversation when a run started going particularly well, and we actually had a chance of finishing this one. It helps that Renowned Explorers is such a cool concept for a game to begin with. Yes, you can go the route of punching all your problems out of existence, but there's a lot more focus on resolving encounters in a variety of both physical and diplomatic ways. See, instead of depleting a health bar, you're trying to break your enemy's spirit, and you can do this by assaulting them with harsh rhetoric, convincing them that your cause is just and right, or by whipping out a sword and ending conversations the easy way. Or the hard way, depending on what the mood of the fight is right now. There's this rock, paper, scissors mechanic going on where you're trying to counter your foe's approach with a superior strategy. If they're being aggressive, you want to taunt them into being way less accurate with insults. If they're being nasty, you embarrass them and increase your speech defense by being the bigger man. And you want to make sure you don't ignore this, because the stat bonuses a mood advantage gives are so huge that they can swing the entire fight. Then you have the cast of characters you can play as, and this, right here, is where you're going to get the most mileage out of this game. Sure, they have their own unique abilities and mechanics in combat, but these guys are way, way more than just stat sheets. Having specific characters over others can totally change the way certain events would unfold because they have strengths, weaknesses, vices, or particularly strong views on how to handle the situation. They might be superstitious or proud or have dreams of grandeur or even a relationship to one of the characters you just happen to meet. And this may or may not come up in your adventure based on where you go and what you do. You never really know what's going to happen. It gets even better when you realize that every team needs a leader, and every character has a special skill they bring to the table when in that leadership position. You even unlock more potential leaders by including that person on another team and completing enough expeditions with them, encouraging you to play just one more game and see if their skill gives you just what you need. There's the mad scientist Anna and the massive bonuses she gets from research, the tactical genius Victor and his surprisingly rare support skills. And Pedrino is just the best, or as we lovingly took to calling him, Pinhedro. This man became a legend over the course of our playthroughs. He's competent, he's charismatic, he throws amazing parties, and he's just good at everything, even if the stats screen says otherwise. If a challenge he undertook comes up bad, he didn't fail. He's just taking it easy on his enemies because it's more fun for him if he doesn't win all the time. Oh my god! I just realized something. Heroic, overpowered, bald. I'm so happy that I not only got to experience this game, but also experience it the way I did. That I got to share it with other people. Not just the guys in the call with me, but also you, the viewers, the people that make these kinds of videos possible. And when I really think about it, that goes back to my grandfather too, because I endeavor to live my life by his example, by being insightful, kind, and doing the absolute best I can for those I care about. I guess what I'm saying is, thanks for being here for me, guys. What's your favorite video game sequel? GTA? Halo? Smash Brothers? It's a lot easier to appreciate how good these games are when you look back at the original and realize just how far the teams behind them have come, especially when the first game already set the bar so high. That is exactly how I feel about BanjoTooie. This might just be the best collectathon game ever made, even edging out A Hat in Time in my book, because it takes advantage of things that only a sequel can. You go into it with a preconceived notion of what Banjo-Kazooie is supposed to be, and then it completely smashes that expectation by being way bigger, more polished, and even allowing you to retain all of the moves and tools you picked up in the last entry. Especially when compared to a series like Metroid, which starts you over at square one at the beginning of every game, I can appreciate that little design choice to this very day. The only other game I've seen do that is Rayman Legends, and if there are any other good examples, please, please, please tell me about them in the comments. I'm always interested in more games like that. I'm so impressed with how smartly designed this game is. Bunching up a lot of the collectibles like notes and eggs into groups not only reduced the number of things they'd have to render in any particular area, thus giving them leeway to make the levels even bigger, but also reduces the headaches that used to come from wanting to get 100% but missing just one note somewhere in the 4 separate seasons of Click Clock Wood. Yes, that actually happened to me once as a kid. There's no longer a dancing animation that stops you in your tracks when you pick up a jigsaw piece. It's way easier to swim around this time. And on top of your old moves, you get a set of even better ones that are somehow even more fun to play around with. Moves like the split-up technique, first-person aiming, and the how did I ever survive without that ability to grab onto ledges. And then you have the callbacks to the original game, which all end in just about the most satisfying way you can imagine. You meet up with Gobi again, who completes his dream of traveling to the lava world. You finally get to play around with that fabled T-Rex transformation. They even brought back the washing machine and made it an integral part of one of the levels. It's the most agitating level in the game, but still. The only loose end they didn't tie up was the whole stop and swap thing, but with how good everything else is here, am I really going to sit and complain about that? Especially when we got most of the rewards anyway? Nah. Although, there is one criticism I do want to address, and that's how everybody says this game has way too much backtracking. You guys do realize there are shortcuts in every world where this is applicable that make it really easy to go back to where you need the new move and then pick up right where you left off, yeah? Like, you learn Bill Drill in Glitter Gulch Mine, and then Bullion Bill asks you to go back to Mayahem Temple specifically to open up a shortcut back into Glitter Gulch Mine, which just happens to be conveniently right next to the only Jiggy in the temple that you couldn't pick up the first time around, but can with the same move you use to open the shortcut. Every single section that requires backtracking in this game is like that. I feel like the only sane man in an insane world sometimes, because how am I the only person on Earth to realize this? This game didn't exasperate the collectathon formula, it perfected it. It realized the dream of an incredibly huge and packed world, alive with enemies and fantastic characters, while being as player-friendly as possible. And do I even need to mention the music? Come on, it's Grant Kirkhope. The Jiggy Wiggy's challenge theme is my favorite piece of music in any video game ever. I get irredeemably happy whenever I listen to it. I don't know what else to say. This game practically wrote the book on how to make an amazing sequel. I would not be surprised in the slightest if you told me it was used in game design courses for that exact reason. If you have any interest in the Nintendo 64, you owe it to yourself to give this one a shot, but only after you've played the original first. See? I told you to expect more awesome music in this list. Bought on a whim by my parents thanks to an in-store demo, the original DDR was my first exposure to rhythm games, and quickly became one of the most played games on my PS1. Right up until the dance pad broke, because back in the day, those things were cheaper than a team of 6 Mewtwo's. I didn't care though. With no help from anybody, I figured out how to play it on controller instead. And I felt even less bad about it a few years later when I discovered a DDR Extreme 2 machine at my local arcade. I don't even want to think about how much money I pumped into that thing. No joke, I played DDR so much that when I started taking Chunkook Do classes, people twice my size were getting knocked back and commenting on how strong my kicks were. Bayonetta wishes she had these legs. Extreme 2 is another game for another video though. This year, I want to focus on the original, because much like BanjoTooie, I wouldn't have appreciated it as much without the previous entry, and second, DDR Economics helped shape a lot of my taste in music. The love I have for fast tempos and electronic beats probably came from both being exposed to and wanting to master these songs. And what a soundtrack this game has. Sure, the track list isn't as expansive as some of the later entries, but it's incredibly tight. Whoever was in charge of these games at Konami way back in the day knew exactly what they were doing. Not only do these songs represent a lot of different genres and styles, and not only do they cater to several different levels of skill, but each one naturally lends itself to a completely separate gimmick in terms of play style. Some have really fun lyrics like On the Jazz or Drop the Bomb. Some have ridiculously catchy hooks like Afronova Primeval or Hysteria. Some introduced really cool mechanics that would get expanded on later in the series like Wild Rush. And some yet are just beautiful and haunting like Healing Vision, Era, or Look to the Sky. Then there are songs like Salamander that just hit you with hook after hook of pure electronic goodness, Higher, which is just feel good and fun to sing along with, and Make a Jam, which I dare you to subtitle this. I will pay money for you to make the attempt. And then there's the dark side of this game. Songs like Trip Machine, which is weird and foreboding and doesn't sound like anything else on the disc. Not to mention it's one of the trickier songs in the whole collection, which makes it stand out even more. But the king in that regard is Paranoia, which you don't even unlock at first. It shows up when it feels like it and just sits there, menacingly. It taunts you with that difficulty rating, motivating you to grind out your skills on other songs so that you may one day be ready for it. And just when you think you've seen the worst, the song has a sequel. It's like it came back from the dead for revenge and is even tougher than before. That's how on point this soundtrack is. The songs themselves have personalities. They feel more like characters than the dancer you choose to represent yourself, and actually, come to think of it, this might be where my affinity for maids started. Now, hold up. Stop. I know what you're thinking now that I've said that, and I want to set some ground rules for this. Pay attention, because this is very important. Do not send me art of Maid Zukin. I repeat, do not send me art of Maid Zukin. Are we clear on this? Yes? Okay, good. I'm glad we sorted this out. This game sent me on a path. It's shaped my tastes for years to come. And without giving too much away, the fact that I got a taste for this genre so early in my life has farther-reaching effects further down this list. It's one of the greats, and something that I think any video game music buff needs to experience at least once. What's up, everybody? I probably need to explain myself now why I'm talking to you in front of a camera instead of behind a microphone. Okay, so this entire series of videos started because I wanted to get myself back in the swing of making videos. That was the entire point, to remind myself of the joy, like why I enjoy making these to begin with. The problem is I severely underestimated what it takes out of you to make videos on a daily basis, to produce that kind of review, super edited and recorded content day after day after day. Mistakes have been made. I did not have footage for a lot of these games. I didn't have anything set up in terms of scripts. Like, none of these were made in advance. This was a spur-of-the-moment thing I decided to do, and that led to me having to stay up long nights to record the footage after the fact, like writing up a new script, coming up with the jokes, editing that all together, on top of doing live streams as well. Just the stress of having to make something like that every single day is enormous. Something had to change. Like, I had one of two options here. Either I would end it all together, which, forget that, okay? I promised you guys 25 videos and I'm still gonna make 25 videos. But if they continue going the way they are, something like this is going to happen.
I'm Princess Priscilla Payneweir.
And in the interest of none of you having to see that, I'm going to be changing up the format of these until the 18th. 15th. I just need to knock these out very quickly. I need to get them done ahead of time so that I can produce the final 8, which are the important ones, at a reasonable pace, to do them right, to give them justice, make sure they're not rushed or the quality isn't dropping or anything like that. So, yeah, that's where I'm standing right now. Like, this is for the best, trust me. Like, doing the videos the way I was not okay mentally. Like, I'd have moments where I would just freak out. I was lacking any kind of motivation, and this way, hopefully, I can get the best of both worlds. I can make these in a timely manner and put them out on time at hours when people are actually awake, and I don't have to break my promise. So, here we go. What's today's game again? Yes, Chrono 2, Lunatia's Veil. You know, I've said before in my console list that the PS2 was pretty much one of my absolute favorite platforms for video games of all time. It's given me so many good memories. Like, PS2 games probably make up the most of my collection. Like, here, let me grab a couple of them. I'll just put these down here so that they're not in the way for the whole video. No, stay stable. Don't you quit on me. And it's not just quantity either, it's quality too. Like, some of these games I have sunk countless hours into, and Chrono 2 is one of them. You wouldn't think it is either. Like, it's a platformer. How invested can you get into a particular world? What would drive you to spend that much time in it, to replay stages again and again and again? Especially coming from somebody who has said numerous times that he doesn't like doing the same stuff over again. Which, actually that in itself is kind of an ironic little statement now that I think about it. Okay, but if I bring that discussion back on track, the thing that keeps driving me back to Chrono 2 is that, and this is a theme you're probably going to find a lot with me, is it's just inherently satisfying to play. It's sort of, Hat in Time has the same thing going for it. It's just fun to do. I think that comes down to a number of different factors, actually. I mean, yes, Klonoa himself does control very satisfyingly, and his control scheme, like the entire concept behind it of picking up enemies and using them for several different purposes, is a really cool mechanic. It actually reminds me a lot of Kirby 64 in some ways, which, if I may go off on a tangent for a second, the fact, a lot of people don't know that. Like, if you hold certain enemies above your head in their raw base form in that game, they do different things, but Klonoa took that to the nth level, like the enemies that shoot you upwards if they're electric, or some that give you powers like being able to fly or float around, and I love when the game plays around with that. But the propeller enemy is just so colorful and floaty and loose, and the little, whatever they are, the moos I think they're called, the red guys, how they float up and their eyes are still kind of bugged out, and they got a little smile. There's just this sense of whimsy, this fun factor to the game that really complements the very simple controls and yet the very cool ways they expand on it. Like, it starts good, it starts colorful, and it just keeps getting better as it goes. And then you'll have moments in a stage where some stages aren't even platforming. You might be going down a hill on a surfboard, or you might catch a ride on an eagle, or something might happen like that. I mean, it's not all bright and sunshine. Like, Klonoa 2 gets really, really dark sometimes. There are themes going on here and levels that happen here, especially later in the game, that really stuck with me at that age. They hit me at a point in my life where I was ready to be impressed. I had never seen anything like that before. It lulls you in, it catches you off guard, like you're already in love with this world and these characters, and then really serious stuff starts happening and you're like, oh, it hits you much more strongly because you've already set yourself up mentally. You're vulnerable. They've got you. They've got their emotional hooks just buried so deep inside you. It's a huge roller coaster like that, and that just makes it all the better. And of course the music is absolutely fantastic. I can actually name some of the tunes off the top of my head. Not their names, but the levels they're attached to. Baguji's theme is really good. Lolo's theme is really good. Vort, I think, is the name of the city, the really industrial, like, fire-themed place you go to. There's the Hall of Mirrors that you go to, and I keep mentioning things, and it makes me want to talk about a particular thing, but I'm saving that for the end here. And, of course, the Ark. The Ark, which is not only one of the biggest levels in the entire game, one of the coolest levels in the entire game. You can make an entire video dissecting that one level, picking it apart for all of the cool things it does here and there, and hey, maybe I will one of these days. But I've already got too many sub-series going on. That's like a Game Maker's Toolkit type of thing. I'll leave it to the master, Mark Brown. My niche is video game music. That's the stuff that really makes me nerd out. And there are so many themes in this game that trigger that kind of response. A lot of them, it knows when to really ratchet up the tension. It knows how to set atmosphere. That's the big one, is atmosphere, is what this game hits right on the head, especially when I'm thinking of the Ark theme. It's just so ambient and calming, and it sets the tone. You know exactly how you're supposed to feel about that stage. You get a sense of the place. This is what I think music is supposed to do, is it communicates a story without a single word. You know the entire personality of the level just from listening to the soundtrack in the background, and Chrono 2 just does such a good job of that in every single stage. Like Joyland, when those trumpets start blaring in, wham, wham, ba ba da ba ba. It just, you know exactly what to expect. You know, if the fireworks and the tents and the fact that they actually let you play some carnival games at the beginning there wasn't enough of a tip-off already. Yeah, this world's just got so much charm to it. There are very few things in it that don't make me smile, even if it's sort of a bittersweet thing. The characters just have so much life to them. They're not even just one-note tropes either. They've got different aspects, like how Kat is working against you and she's loyal to her master, or I guess mistress in this case. This is the downside to improv. But she also kind of has a crush on Klonoa, and that evolves as the game goes on, like that relationship between the two of them. Like, she starts going through her own little journey, like, do I actually like this guy? Is this just a passing thing? What does this mean for myself as a character as I go forward? Everyone goes through something like that. Which brings me to the one thing that I kept alluding to over the course of this video, which is Lolo. Lola! Which even just saying it like that just makes me smile, makes me really giddy and happy. This character by herself, you know, it's kind of funny. Somebody brought up in the comments in one of the previous videos, I think it was Crush, where they said, hey Fnu, you've got a thing for redheads, don't you? And, well, looking at this list, spoiler alert, Lolo isn't even the last one that's going to show up, so yeah, maybe. I think I might. But don't you look at me like that either. I was 12 at the time, okay? It wasn't weird then. This is how I was raised. I can explain the whole liking clumsy girls thing if you don't understand it. It's just how I was raised, is to do the best for the people around me. So when I see her getting way too excited and tripping over herself, my first instinct is to just hold my hand out and offer her, like, can I help you back up? That's just how I'm wired as a person. And her voice is adorable, her face is adorable, but her backstory certainly isn't. Everybody in this game has a story, and hers just because she's the one who's always there, the one who makes all of this possible. Like, without a priestess, without somebody living inside that ring, Klonoa can't do the things he's doing. So she worms her way into your heart, and then again, bad things start happening to her. You realize she's not exactly a perfect person. When you start learning more and more about this character, like seeing her true face and some of the mistakes she's made over the course of her life, it makes you understand why things are happening to her the way they are, but you can't help but feel sad for her at the same time. Again, this game just takes you up and down and all over the place to wonderful vistas with amazing music and characters packed in every single corner, like bosses themselves who just won't leave you alone, that keep coming back. I have to be really careful with my words because I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to explain away, ruin for you some of the better twists and turns this game takes you on, but yeah, just go play it for yourself. It's not that hard to find. I think it's actually on PlayStation Network. If it's not, you'll see something right down here at the bottom. But yeah, that's Klonoa 2. Man, is that game a ride. Have I ever mentioned before how JRPGs are some of my favorite video games of all time? If I ever have, I've probably pointed out things like the importance of keeping the difficulty up, because then there's a reason to slow down the combat, because every single move matters. I've probably mentioned things like the exploration and the worlds they build and how everything is so colorful and happy, but I don't think I've ever mentioned, and this is something that's way more relevant to my PS2 days, but I don't think I've ever talked about how, at least back in the day, they had a tendency to surprise me, to do weird and interesting and out there things that I just was not expecting. One of them that I remember very distinctly was Xenosaga, and I played that game way too young. That was the same year I encountered Killer 7. I was like 14 at the time, and it just... I barely remember anything about that game just because so much of it sailed right over my cranium. But one game I do remember distinctly for that exact same reason is Wild Arms 3. Now, you don't see a whole lot of, like, Wild West games to begin with, I don't think. Like, there's the big one everybody points to, which is Red Dead Redemption. And, I don't know, maybe Wild Guns back in the day? Those are the most popular ones. But this, the entire series takes place in that sort of Americana, like, the Badlands kind of thing. It's got a whole story and setting focused around high adventure in an unknown place. People just trying to rough it out in this harsh and unforgiving world, and there's something kind of cool about that. And at least in the beginning, Wild Arms 3 sticks to that. It's all about... It starts with a train heist, for crying out loud. It just nails this on the head. And on top of that, this world has all of these really crazy monsters, and there's this shamanistic magic that's going on in the background, these spirits that govern the goodwill of the entire planet. And of course, you as the player get caught up in all of it. And right from the beginning, this game breaks your convention because you've got 4 different characters to choose from, and you can play through their backstories in any order you wish. It's... So, before you even begin the adventure proper, you get a really good sense of who these characters are, and this is not just a cutscene. Like I said, play through. You get to control each one of them separately in their own dungeon, centered entirely around them, explaining who they are, what they're good at, what their place in the world is, and why they matter. And yeah, that's pretty much as good a start as I could think of. They even introduced one of the recurring villains at that point. And from there on, it's just everything opens up to you. It really nails that sense of adventure, this game. It gives you this wide open world. It breaks down to its core essence, this sense of, I have no idea what's out there in this great wide expanse, but I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna find my destiny, I'm gonna go on this amazing adventure with these people. It gives me the same kind of feeling that people talk about games like Wind Waker, that sense of you can go anywhere you want. And yes, the story kind of dictates what you can do and where, but it's not quite Metal Saga or anything like that, which maybe I'll talk about that game another year. You can't quite go to an area that you're not ready for, but at the same time, I don't think I ever really noticed that. Like, functionally, it never sunk in that the game was holding me back. It was always leading me to places I wanted to go anyway, places that looked interesting, that felt interesting, and there were secrets to find, don't get me wrong. That's actually one of the cooler elements of this game. The idea that there's so much to do, you're encouraged to poke around in places that you're not supposed to be, because maybe you'll find something like a puzzle to take your mind off of all the combat, or maybe you'll find this entire other side quest or this hidden area up on a hill that introduces this whole new mechanic. This game just has some of the best possible side quests. Each one feels unique and interesting, and it has its own reward system, it has its own quirks, its own ideas. And I will say, this game does suffer a bit from JRPG syndrome, in the sense that it starts with this really cool concept, this Wild West setting, like this Calamity Jane, Billy the Kid kind of rootin' tootin' gun shootin'. And by the end, it's this story about demons and alternate worlds and this, I don't want to give too much away, but it's taking these twists and turns that sort of boils it down to what every other game in the genre feels like. But I tell you what, it does not matter, to me at the very least. It does not matter because of the characters, of the central cast that I lauded a little bit ago, because you don't know everything there is to know about each and every one of them by the time you're done with their prologues. You think you do, but they grow, they change, they have journeys to go on, and not just like in the physical sense of traveling through the world. They become different people by the time you're done with this adventure, by the time you reach the end game. Jet starts as this absolutely unlikable person. He kind of reminds me of Tatsumaki from One Punch Man, in the sense that nobody likes him. It just kind of worked out that way, that you have to travel with this guy. In fact, Virginia slaps that guy a couple times just to remind him that what he's doing is bad and that nobody appreciates it. And yeah, here I go again. Let's play Waifu Wars. Virginia Maxwell, in all seriousness, is probably one of my favorite leads in any video game, at least female leads. One of my favorite female characters in all of video games, because she is so go-getting. Not only is she great with those pistols, not only does she look really good in that dress, not only is she willing to defy her family's expectations and not be this prim and proper girl and actually seek her destiny. She is a leader. She is the glue that keeps this group together. Like, they would not function without her. She's the one who always gets up and says, hey, let's go there and do this. Let's go capture this point. Let's go get the summon spirits. Let's go learn magic. Let's go save the world, guys. Without which, I think these guys would just drift apart. Like, maybe they'd stay together for a while, but they'd butt heads. They'd see differences. just fascinating to me for that. I love her for the fact that she has just so much to her. She's that kind of character. She's the kind of person you love rooting for. You love seeing her succeed, seeing her get what she wants by the end, and maybe everything she wants. It's implied that there's kind of a thing between her and Jet, but it's never really expanded upon. And you just get, speaking of relationships, you just get every single level of that. You have more than one rival in this game. You have more than one bad guy. You have more than one force that you inevitably butt heads with. There are certain villains that become allies as you go. There are certain villains that just are out there for their own gains, and you happen to butt heads with one another. There are certain side villains who become major villains. They become big parts in something way bigger than you or them. And of course, there are those force of nature villains too. There are allies and enemies and all kinds of different players in this world that you might not know who they are, but you feel their presence. Something tells you that they are there. Living in this world and the state that it's in, you get the idea that something's going on. You know, I keep having to remind myself to actually talk about the mechanics in these games, typically. It gets so... This is another reason JRPGs are in the top echelon of my favorites. I love really good characters, I love really good stories, I love feeling like I'm part of something that isn't reality for a while, which is why I laud them so much for that. But this game, it does a lot of really cool things that make seeking out those moments, seeking out those characters and those set pieces really freaking rewarding. It's not just your typical turn-based combat. Everybody complains about grinding in these games, as an example. Like, random encounters, which this game kind of has, yes. You never know when an enemy is going to come across your path, but if you don't want to deal with them right now, if you just want to keep hacking away at this puzzle and trying your hand at getting things done, you can do that, because the game lets you skip a certain number of encounters. This exclamation point will appear above your head, and if you press X, right when that comes up, it gives you about 1.5 seconds to react. You can just get past the battle altogether. You don't have to fight those enemies at all, and depending on how strong you are, you can just keep skipping encounters. Like, you can just ignore the green exclamation marks by yourself without spending any of those points, which makes it really easy to go past earlier areas. It's one of those really smart mechanics. It's there when you need it, you can cancel encounters when you need it, and you can keep fighting them when you want to. It reminds me a lot of Bravely Default, except you don't even have to go into a menu for it. It's just there, it's dynamic, and it's really freaking interesting because of that. It works for you. It's the best example of it I think I've ever seen, despite the fact that it feels a little limited at times. And then when you actually get into combat, it takes a whole new approach to the magic system, too. Like, FP, or force points, is what they call it in this series. And I know this isn't a new mechanic in Wild Arms 3, but gosh darn it, this was my first exposure to it, and that doesn't make it any less of a cool mechanic. See, you don't spend your FP like you do in most other games for casting magic. You just need a certain amount of it to cast a particular spell. And this makes leveling up way more interesting than it is in other games by itself, because every time you level up, whenever you start an encounter, you get one more force point to work with right from the beginning. And at a certain point, that means you can cast certain really good spells right from the get-go. You don't have to build them up or anything, you don't have to And that's the thing, you can build it up as the battle goes on. You can keep getting more and more force points just by attacking the enemy. There are other ways, like you can get abilities like FP Charge, I think, if you guard, to keep building that meter up even when you're defending or things like that. And of course, there are abilities that do expend it, but they are huge skills. Really strong abilities, like how Gallows can hit all the enemies with a magic attack. He can spread out the damage like that. Or Virginia, who can use one item on every single party member. She can turn an elixir into a mega elixir just by using this resource that you get during combat. That makes her another reason I love her so much. She's one of the best support characters in all of video games, which I guess, considering what we've talked about, is really appropriate. And I have to say, one of my absolute favorite parts of this game is that I think, without any shadow of a doubt, that Wild Arms 3 has some of the best boss battles in any turn-based RPG. Hands down. Every single one of them has their own unique mechanics, ideas, they have their own gimmick, their own strategies you could apply that completely flip everything on its head and make you rethink the battle. And here's the crazy part, they are immediately apparent. Not only are they different from one another, but they're all immediately understandable and interesting. You're like, okay, so this isn't one of those awful things where I have to restart the entire battle all over again. Nah. You can adapt on the fly. You'll still be okay as long as you're a proper level, and so long as you're smart, you play well, and you're paying attention. You start to realize, this is why this guy works this way, and here's how I counter it using the tools I already have. It's a game that lets you play it your way, but still challenges you here and there to rethink everything you're doing. That's so cool to me. It makes those set-piece moments even bigger, even more awesome. It makes them so memorable. Every single one of these fights stands out in my head. And there's so many good examples, I'm not even going to list them right now. I don't want to give it away. I want you to experience it in the moment. It's hard to really nail down one particular reason that Wild Arms 3 is amazing to me. It's the game that I think, aside from Earthbound, pretty much put me down this path. It made me love this genre. It clued me in onto how good JRPGs could really be when they were done right. And it's something I pine for, honestly. I'm waiting for another game to come along and do what Wild Arms 3 did, to capture that same kind of magic, that same sense of you don't know what's going to happen. I feel like JRPGs have fallen into kind of a rut. Like, even if I've never played that particular game, I've still played it before, you know? Once in a while, I'll get a surprise or two, but again, those are a little further down the list. But for now, this still stands. People ask me, hey, I want to start playing JRPGs, where should I begin? One of the first things I'll point to is Wild Arms 3. Hey there, Fnu here. Listen, I have a question for you. Are you looking for a fantastic JRPG on the PS2 with an incredible leveling system, beautiful characters, an episodic storyline, and one of the most beautiful orchestrated soundtracks you've ever heard? Well, that's oddly specific, but man, does Dragon Quest VIII have you covered! You know, I think even by the mid-era of the PS2, I was starting to get a little jaded out on JRPGs, at least the more traditional ones. Like, I could tell the interesting ones from the bad ones. I had started with a lot of the really interesting ones, as we've already discussed. And Dragon Quest VIII was kind of refreshing in that sense. Like, usually you level up and you maybe unlock an ability, you get some stat boosts, and to be fair, that kind of still happens in this game. Occasionally you will unlock something new as you go, but most of your actual character development, which shapes your role in combat, what weapon you'll be using, what abilities you'll have, is up to you. You get these ability points every time you level up. These, you can pump them into one of the several weapon categories or a passive category that every character has. So depending on what you want to chase right now, maybe you have a different idea like, I'll have this character use this weapon instead, or, oh, I played around with this character, but I really want them to have this other piece of equipment instead. Maybe I'll have this character do it. And it feels so much more rewarding because of that, because you are directly, the game isn't deciding for you how your abilities are unlocked. You decide when to put what abilities where. I wish it told you things like how many points you needed towards a new skill, but hey, at least you know you'll have unlocked everything if you get at least one of them up to 100. I mentioned before that Wild Arms 3 has the absolute best bosses in any turn-based RPG, but don't get me wrong, Dragon Quest VIII comes really freaking close. It tries its absolute hardest, and eventually, yes, high-level play will look like you're putting buffs on everybody, you're making sure that enemies die as quickly as possible, you're psyching yourself up. That's another fantastic mechanic, by the way, the psych up. Like, getting your characters pumped, specifically spending turns in order to give yourself more power. It actually, or I was about to say it reminds me a lot of Bravely Default, but if we're going chronologically, Bravely Default would remind me a lot of Dragon Quest VIII. I guess would be more appropriate. But the other thing, none of that gameplay really matters if there's not a reason to make you want to go through the world, and that feels strange coming from me. It feels weird to say that considering how much I evangelize gameplay. To me, JRPGs hold a special place because I kind of know what I'm getting into. I go into them expecting that maybe I'm going to have to slow down and smell the roses and absorb everything that's happening around me first, and there is a lot to take in this world. Every single region you go to, every single place you visit has its own self-contained story. Well, I say self-contained, chances are the events that are taking place there are a direct result of the big bad, of the big thing that's affecting the world, but it almost feels like, especially because of the art style, Akira Toriyama, I think his name is, same guy who did Dragon Ball, designed these characters. Because of the cell shading, his designs, how wacky and colorful and just over the top everybody is to begin with, and the fact that every single one of these regions has its own problems, its own ecosystem, its own obstacles that it needs to overcome, it feels like you're watching episodes of a cartoon. It's kind of nostalgic for me in that sense. It reminds me of watching Toonami or something like that. Just sitting down in front of my TV in the afternoon after school and just seeing what happens next, following characters that I already enjoy, except this time I get to dictate the action. I have a direct influence over where they go and what they do, and, you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with cartoons, with traditional media like music and shows and whatnot, but I really do think, and thanks to games like Dragon Quest VIII, that video games are the most superior art form out there. I just enjoy them more in general on a base level than other things, because you can do stuff like that. They can give you those kinds of experiences. And dude, that orchestrated soundtrack, those are some good strings. That's some good everything. There's just an effect an orchestra has on you mentally. I think it was the producer for Super Mario Galaxy who says he almost didn't include orchestrated music because he felt like it would distract from the game or something. No. No. It actually has the exact opposite effect. It makes you more immersed because orchestras particularly, they have this sense of scope, this sense of size. In the case of Super Mario Galaxy, that was great because of you were exploring an entire universe, and here you've got the big wide world open to you. You've got this place that feels like a place because it has that ambience, that feel to it that only that kind of music can give. It's practically tradition at this point. There isn't a Dragon Quest game that's been released since 8 that hasn't featured this kind of thing, you know, aside from remakes, and even some of those too. I'm just hopeless, aren't I? I keep mentally coming back to the characters in all of these videos. I've slowly come to the realization that this means so much to me. I can't help it. I'm a writer by trade. I love seeing people who feel like people, even if I know in the back of my head they're fictional. I love stories that still get me to empathize with something that isn't actually there, that's clever enough to pull off that kind of trick. And man, how can you not love the characters in this game? Yangus. Freaking Yangus, who almost became a meme in his own right. Oh, blimey! Just that accent, that look, the fact that he's actually a really useful character does a lot of your damage, you know, right up until you start getting certain abilities, but spoilers! There's the ever-cocky Angelo, who claims to know exactly what he's doing, but you can tell he's kind of flying by the seat of his pants just as much as everybody else is. Your hero character who, while they are a blank slate, there's a good way and a bad way to go about that. It's in the name. He's a hero. He's willing to do what needs to be done, and that doesn't mean he doesn't have a place in this world. He has a story. He was somebody before this. He has, especially if you get into the post-game content, he has a history. He has a place. He has many different things that you can uncover as you go on. There are mysteries to solve. And it's a blast to figure out what they are as you go. And it all wraps up at the end. That end, all of them, honestly, even the new one they introduced in the 3DS remake, which, yes, you can actually play this game on 3DS, and it's very good in its own right. Added a lot of great stuff, but my favorite part about this game, my favorite part about this story and this world and the people in it, is that it gets me to fall in love with them, and I was so, because they build up some of this during the story, I started thinking, crap, it's gonna be one of those. I'm gonna have to go out to this other dungeon in the middle of nowhere, and have to do all of this extra stuff just to get what I want. Nah, my friend, you dropped 80 hours plus into this, we're gonna reward you for it. There is no bad ending in this game. There is a great ending and an even better ending, and I respect it so much for that. They know the time I dropped into this story. They know the amount of effort I put into raising these characters and helping them save the world, and I just love how the producers said, you know what? We got you, buddy. We're gonna give you absolutely everything you want, especially if you go through the trouble of finding everything, of doing all of the extra stuff, and yeah, major props to the Dragon Quest team for that. You know how to hit me right here, guys. Right here. It's just a masterpiece. There's no other word for it. This game kind of set the bar there for a little while. It was the go-to standard. Like, I think even people who didn't traditionally like JRPGs started to fall in love with Dragon Quest VIII just because it was so, there's no other word for it, charming. There's so much to it. It has this feeling, this style, this little edge that's been honed to perfection over 8 games. It's the kind of level of style that you can only find by making so many iterations and trying again and again. And it shows. This is an experience made by people who know what makes a JRPG really freaking good. And I tell you what, even though I don't have footage of it, it still holds up to this very day.
Shoot! I forgot to mention Jessica, another one of my favorite redheads from video games. I'm so sorry, my love. You're strong and adventurous and good with a whip, and God, you made my teenage years so much easier.
You thought I was just gonna have the one adult-oriented game on the list. No, there are some absolutely fantastic ones out there. This one especially, I think calling it just a porn game is severely selling short the work Phenoxo and his crew have done, because I'm not unconvinced Trials in Tainted Space isn't the greatest RPG ever made, simply because the role you are playing can be just about anything. Anything you can possibly think of. If you can dream it up, chances are you can make that character in this game. If you want to do something like a transgender fox centaur thing that is also a technological master that modifies his own shield or her shield, I don't know, and has attack drones that shoot lightning bolts at enemies. You can do that. I've made that character before. Not necessarily because I'm into that kind of thing, but just because I can. I love games that do that kind of thing, that give you just unconventional choices, somehow still unconventional. That does weird and strange things like that. That's kind of the point of the entire game. That's part of what makes it so magical, is that you can make whatever you want. You can go out into this universe. And what a smart idea it was to make this game in the setting it was. You may or may not know, the people behind Trials in Tainted Space are the same guys who created Corruption of Champions. Yes, that game. However, I like the futuristic setting way more than the fantasy one, because you can get away with so much more here. There are so many more awesome things you can see and do and buy and interact with. You can go anywhere. You can go to different planets. They all have their own environments, their own characters to meet. Just go out there, find great new technologies and people and philosophies and lifestyles and items that can change your character even more into your dream of what you want them to be. Meet some interesting people, make some mistakes, the universe is your oyster. Go explore. And I gotta say, for a game that is completely free, tackling a lot of the subject matter that it does, this is some of the best writing in any video game. It is top notch. I do not make that statement lightly. These guys, it's not just on the level of them telling a good story. It's not just on the level of them having good flow, having good pacing, knowing how to set things up and lead you along emotionally. Every single character has their own voice. They speak in a certain way. They act in a certain way. They say things in such a way that makes them feel unique. Like, you can find certain characters that use words that others do not. They have their own little quirks, their own personalities, and that comes forward in every single word. Not only that comes out of their mouth, but is used to describe them. It's really an example of how fantastic text-based games can actually be. And there's a lot to it. That's the other thing that blows my mind. There are novels worth of content in this game. So much good writing, and it is consistently on that high level. It keeps at that bar. It sets it up near the ceiling early on, and it just never leaves. And there's so much to this game, so many cool things that can happen naturally and all the different things you can do with your character. When you mix those two together, just roaming wherever you want as whoever you want, and every single inch of it is packed with so many cool events that could just happen to you at any moment, it lends itself really well to some amazing and unpredictable set pieces. I don't think I've ever had two characters who were exactly alike, even if I was generally going for the exact same thing. This world is dynamic, it changes, it keeps surprising me as I delve deeper and deeper into it. Like, here's a perfect example. I was fighting a boss, and we were having a lot of trouble. I had a guest character with me this time around. Usually you do combat by yourself, but occasionally you have somebody else with you. This time I did, and we were both blasting away at this thing, and she ended up getting pinned against the wall, and this thing was about to start attacking her, when all of a sudden a light just switched on in my brain, and I realized, hang on a second, I've got this other weapon that does other things. I suddenly figured out, hey, this is the strategy I should start applying, and I managed to save her just in time. I managed to take down the boss with a brand new strategy, and that just happened in the spur of the moment. Moments like that are everywhere. Not just, it's not just the obvious thing. It's not just the big two reasons you'd be here. There are so many cool character moments, combat moments, moments of you finding great equipment, like legitimately cool pieces of armor and weapons and new shields all over the place. Little items that have so much lore attached to them. Like, if you go poking around to the codex, there's even more awesome writing that clues you into just how deep this universe goes. It's a place. You don't see a single picture of what this universe looks like, just little portraits of the characters here and there, and yet you have such a clear idea of what it is, what it looks like, and what it would feel like to be there. Just from how good the writing describes it, how well it paints a picture in your brain. I mean, for goodness sake, the random tiles you go to, every single spot on the grid, on the map, has its own little description. Just something that happens to be going on in that square, even if it's completely inconsequential. The production that went into a game where you can go out into the universe and have sex with a tanuki has that kind of effort put in, and I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of badass. That is really freaking awesome that this is something that exists in the universe, that it's putting that kind of effort into something, don't lie, we all enjoy. Yeah, I have nothing but respect for this game. And you know what? I feel like more people should. Now, why on earth do I like Saints Row the Third? Never mind enough to put it in my top 25. Well, let me count the ways. Shall I start with the character creation, which is so detailed that you can create just about any person you can possibly think of? Or, you could just create an abomination of nature and give it a zombie voice pack. Yes, this world-renowned crime syndicate who have practically become Hollywood celebrities at this point. Everybody just conveniently forgets the fact that they are constantly breaking all of society's rules. And their leader is spending every cutscene going, you can do that. Shall I mention the fact that directly after that, you go through a sequence where you are dive bombing through the air, ducking and weaving around all of the cargo dropped by this plane, and then having to dive bomb through the plane, coming out the other end and then trying to dodge even more shrapnel, all the while your character is sarcastically quipping about how much cargo they actually managed to stuff inside this plane, and then heroically grabbing one of your teammates out of the air before parachuting down to the ground, realizing you need weapons to get revenge against the people who did this to you, and so you go raid a military base for the guns you need. This is the first hour of gameplay. This is a game where one of the side quests is where you are ragdolling yourself against trucks and getting flung halfway across the city due to the impact. This is a game where one of the side quests is about taking rocket launchers and tanks and trying to destroy as much property as you possibly can. And this is a game where you can customize your character with all kinds of awesome outfits. But as Egoraptor so succinctly put it in one of his videos, which may or may not be right here on the screen right now, you can just ignore all of that and go waltzing around naked, beating people to death with a dildo bat. Saints Row is awesome because the entire point of this game's existence is dumb, stupid fun. It does not care what you think about it. You can make all of the jokes about it being a Grand Theft Auto clone as much as you want, but at the end of the day, you're wrong. Well, you are right to an extent, but it went off and did its own thing so much to the point where the two series aren't even comparable anymore. Like, Saints Row just embraced the one thing people always end up doing in those games. It realized why people like playing GTA games to begin with, and that's just to see how much chaos, how much confusion and mayhem you can cause as quickly as possible. And it did everything in its power to create a world where it would not only be encouraged for you to do that, but you have all the tools you could possibly need to make that happen. It's a world where it seems like that fits, where you can be that kind of player and not have to feel guilty about it at all. Maybe a little guilty, but then again, it doesn't exactly make you feel bad for all of the citizens in this place that happen to get caught in the crossfire. It's one of those games where you can just indulge in your baser instincts without having to care. It's one of those, there's no malice or anything. It's not trying to send a powerful message or anything like that. It's just, it commits so much to the idea of being idiotic and just basely fun that I can't help but respect it. It's almost artsy in that sense. It must have been so much fun working for the development team on this game, because you know, half of the design meetings must have just been them sitting around in the offices going, you know what this game needs? And then immediately implementing that into the game. It's the Warframe mindset, where they just put things into the game because they think they're cool, and they just kind of design a loose story around that. It also, and speaking of the story, that's not half bad either. It's not going to win any awards, but again, that's kind of the point. It has my favorite joke in the entire series at the very least. Or, hell, one of my favorite jokes in all of video games, which you spend an entire mission taking over a rival gang's HQ, this giant tower in the middle of the city. And once you finally get to the top, well, halfway along the way, you encounter this big ol' strongman, this genetic experiment that you set free. And when all of you collectively get up to the HQ, the penthouse suite in the very top floor, and you've evicted the leader, everybody's just kind of looking around like, we need to get rid of this pink. And he responds with, you prefer a more manly shade, like purple? And everyone just slowly turns their heads to him like, you did not just say that. Just moments like that, they're everywhere. It's constant, no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, no matter how I decide to get where I'm going, and what activities I decide to engage in. Saints Row is just constantly rewarding me. It's something that, again, is just fun to play on a base level. It's a world where I feel like I can do anything, or I can just be whatever I want to be. I am let loose to have fun however I want, to make my own fun, more often than not if there aren't any missions to play around with, and I can go about that however I like. It's hard for me not to smile when I think of Saints Row, just because the world is fun, the gameplay is fun, and the characters are fun. It almost feels like an alternate universe Nintendo game in that sense, because everything is centered around that core 3-letter idea, you know? Like, the moment that really sold me on this game, the one point where I knew I was going to love this thing to death for the rest of time, is early on when you get into the car with one of the other characters and he's messing around with the radio, and then all of a sudden What I Got by Sublime starts playing on the radio, and both of them start singing along to it, which major props to the person who mashed up all of the different PC voice tracks along with the other characters together into one video. You are doing the Lord's work, good sir. Thank you for putting that out there in the world. Some games try really hard to follow certain trends out there. They try really hard to chase the new big thing, to be a part of this genre that people have been gravitating to. And then along comes something like Saints Row, which just does things for the sake of doing them, that just exists in its own little bubble, its own little awesome, hilarious bubble. And when it's so satisfying to play to begin with, yeah, how can I not include it in my favorites? Just go play Saints Row 3. You are truly missing out if you haven't. When I first came up with this list, there were a lot of games I knew had to be on here right from the start. This is one of them. Like, this was a no-brainer. This was a complete given. Like, it's the first game I ever played on the first console I ever owned. Like, a dedicated video game machine that was all mine. I was 6 years old at the time. I plugged in the cartridge, Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World, and then I went over to the one that looked most appealing, which was World. I started up a new file, I read that opening crawl, got lost a little bit in Yoshi's house, and got the brief bit of story the game told me, went left, entered a level, and I immediately died to the Koopa sliding down the hill. Like I said in a previous video, I wasn't always great at video games. It was kind of a struggle to figure out that initial world, that initial island. Like, that was where I ground my teeth on video games really for the first time. That kind of video game at the very least. It was my first exposure to, my first ever platformer, and I'd argue still one of the best, but I'll get to that in a moment. I learned the levels, I learned the controls, I figured out what power-ups did and how they affected Mario. Like, I figured out the different aspects of, like, the spin jump versus the normal jump, completely by accident, by the way. I figured out you can just poof the Rexes instead of whatever you could do. I had to have a lot of different people teach me things about this game. I didn't figure out everything on my own. And then I beat the first castle, and then there was a whole nother world open to me. It was both exciting and kind of intimidating at the same time, because I thought that first screen was the entire game. I had no sense of perspective. perspective. I didn't know that games were typically way bigger than that at that point in time. I never owned a Nintendo Entertainment System. I jumped straight into the 16-bit era. Heck, I was so sheltered, I didn't even know what a Sega was until I discovered GameTrailers.com like 7 years later in my life. This was my world for a little while. And it just slowly, I chipped away at that. I tried to figure things out. I got really good at the opening chapters of that game, because remember, my Super Nintendo did not save. If I wanted to beat a game, I had to do it in a single sitting. None of my games actually carried over data from one run to another. So, I ended up playing those stages again and again and again, and you know what? That was enough for me. Right up until one of my cousins taught me about Star Road. See, this is actually my favorite thing about Super Mario World, is it is, I guess you'd call it a straight platformer. I mentioned this in my Freedom Planet video, like collectibles and levels, the star cards, how I like Freedom Planet a lot because I don't feel like I explained this enough. There is something you get for getting all the star cards in this game, but it's kind of just a really cool bonus. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. There's still a complete game there that I can play and enjoy and have fun with. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. In Super Mario World, the reason I don't like the later games as much as I like this one is because they have star coins, or they have some kind of collectible like that, and behind those coins is more levels, more worlds, more bonus stages, that kind of thing. It's like I have to stop all of my forward progression, and then I have to look up, and it's like, okay, well now I've got a puzzle I need to figure out. Let me just stop what I was doing and figure this out now. It kind of kills the flow. It really does. I notice this way more in games like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze or Donkey Kong Country Returns and whatnot. Which, don't get me wrong, those are fantastic games too, but I just like this one because the alternate exits, you uncover them just by playing the level. You've got to find some other way around, some other door. You got to find a clever way to go about exploring the place, or maybe there's this little corner you hadn't found yet. You don't have to stop exploring. You don't have to stop playing at all. It's just you and your skill separating you from the Star Road in an easy way to Bowser. And later on, when I got even better at the game, the Special World. Yup. I've seen the alternate color palette for the game. I've seen all of the piranha plants with the pumpkin faces and the fall Halloween-y aesthetic. That's a turn on, right? And you know what, here's the crazy thing. I actually haven't seen everything there is to see in this game. I've never had a run where I've gone back and unlocked every single exit, seen every single path out of every level, and I'm kind of scared to. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I love the fact that this game exists in my brain the way it does right now, where I could go back to it anytime I wanted, and there will still be things I can discover, like the levels will still be fresh, because some of them I played so little I barely have any recollection of them at all. And I still enjoyed what I did play as much as I did. One of these days, maybe someday I will do it. I will go back and I will play through those stages again just to complete my love for this game. Doesn't mean I'll have it all completely memorized, and you know, even if I did, I'd probably still come back to play it again just because, like I said, it is so rewarding. It just feels like a blast. There's no stops. There's nothing that just hits me, and there aren't any of the tropes that I find agitating or annoying in today's games. It's just, and I sound like such an old fogey for saying that, but it's a platformer just the way I like it. That's all I've got to say, really. I mean, a lot of my love for this game is something that I can't put into words. It's undefinable. It's nostalgia. It's really hard to communicate that feeling, that sort of swelling up you feel in your chest, that feeling like a weight has been lifted off of you, like you look at this game and you just smile uncontrollably. But that's something I'm going to go a lot more into detail on the 24th. So, until then, bring in that wrapping paper! I don't think Iwata's principle of making games that are just fun has ever been more applicable than the first 4 Mario parties. And yes, this is a 4-way tie. Unlike most people that choose sides in this debate, I appreciate all of those games, that entire block, and the main reason for that, I think, is that every single one of them, the reason there is such a divide, is that they all have something the others don't. Let's start with Mario Party 1, for example. That game is a very happy place in my head. When I end up in that village again, and I hear that very low-key but upbeat music, it's something magical, it's something tranquil, it's something peaceful. It feels just like this joyful little place I can visit anytime and just relax. It's this digital space where I can tune out, where I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the boards, but I know it's going to be fun. Mario 1 has the magic. It has the first game effect, where it's something brand new, something nobody had ever tried before, and has so many cool and experimental ideas that a lot of which they got rid of as the series went on. The fact that you could actually lose coins in certain mini-games. There was one mini-game where you were just beating up another player in a Bowser suit with hammers and trying to steal their money. Like, I kind of realize why those things didn't come back, but at the same time, they exist in that game, and it gives it this edge the others don't. Not to mention, that was the pinnacle of Bowser's evil. I don't think he has ever been more disruptive in this entire series as he was in the first game. He was not only a force that you feared in that game, but he was downright hilarious. Like on Luigi's board, where he has this machine that'll make a coin for you, a generator, a single coin, and then he charges you 30 coins for the privilege of using it. I love stuff like that. He was just a straight jerk in that game, and it's awesome. Now, if Mario Party 1 was the game that had all the magic, Mario Party 2 was the one that had all the character. What I mean by that is every single board had a theme. It was defined, I think is the best word to describe it. Every single character had costumes, there were incredible set pieces, there were big board events that made sense for what was actually going on. Like, maybe you were pirates, like, fighting each other on the high seas and dodging cannonballs as you were crossing bridges. Maybe you were wizards trying to go about this forest that had a day and night mechanic that was swapping back and forth, and all kinds of magical mishaps that were happening. Maybe you were in the Wild West and you were traveling on a train to get places before your rivals. That kind of thing. These themes were so strong, and they were so defined, that it made every single board feel like a character in its own right. It set a standard that I don't think we've hit again for quite a while, very rarely. Like, every couple games you'll get a board that was as good as just one of the ones in Mario Party 2. And not to mention, this was the game that had items in it for the first time, these game-changing things, and the fact that every single AI player had their own preferences. You want to play an awesome version of Mario Party 2? Play with Wario, Donkey Kong, and Yoshi. You will never have had a more chaotic time, because you'll be warping all over the place, Donkey Kong will keep acting Like he made a mistake because he keeps summoning Big Bowser to the field, and then Wario's just dueling people all over the place. It's great. It adds so much fun and chaos, and that's what Mario Party really is. Like, we complain through all the backstabbing and times you got screwed by the system, but it's really easy to think the game is broken in isolation. Like, if you take the whole thing, like the board as a whole and all of the different games you've played, it does balance it out. The mini games do make it balanced. They do make so much of a difference when you're not paying attention. They mean so much in the grand scheme of things. And that's why we keep coming back to them as the years go by. Like, we always get mad, we're going to get a little ticked off when things don't go our way, but we keep coming back because we know perseverance will pay off. And if we don't win, we earned whatever place we got. Unfortunately, a lot of that board design did not transfer into Mario Party 3, but that doesn't really matter because Mario Party 3 just had more to it. There was so much to that game. There was the introduction of the gambling mini-games. There were so many more items. You could carry 3 items at once. There were rare items you could only get under very special circumstances and certain events that happened on the boards. Like, maybe Toad would descend when you land on an item space, so instead of playing a mini-game for it, you just said something to him and he gave you one of these just game-breaking tools. And then there were all of the dueling mini-games that you could play, just like one player versus another, and even that had its own unique mechanics to it, where you were trying to recruit partners and play mini-games to amass coins and being able to pay an army of little helpers to go crush your adversaries for you. And then the big ones. The ones that also made me love Mario Party 3 and possibly play it more than I probably should have compared to the other ones considering their quality. The introduction of 2 characters, Waluigi and the best princess, Princess Daisy. There's my love for redheads showing up again. Or no, she's brunette, right? Brunettes and redheads, the two are fine. Not to mention she kicked butt in that game. Like, Bowser tries to kidnap her and then she just punches him across the horizon. Just shrugs at you like, what? He got in my way. And now you know why he doesn't kidnap her anymore. And that brings us to Mario Party 4, which is not a popular choice for your favorite Mario Party, for I don't know what reason. The theme is so great. Like, it's one of the first games that addresses that you actually are having a party, a birthday party. It feels from top to bottom like a celebration. There are presents to collect. There are so many mini games that are just joyously fun to play. I think, out of all of them, Mario Party 4 just has the best mini games, which, as I said, are some of the core of what makes the series great. Of what gives it that kind of charm, that energy, that thing that keeps you going, that could help you turn around the entire board and get all of those resources, deny your opponents what they need to get ahead of you in the game. It's the best the series has ever been, in my opinion. And then there's the bonus modes. I probably spent more time in that little side room with Womp, Thwomp, and Zdar than anywhere else in the game. I just loved that collection of special mini-games he had, and the fact that he ranked you based on how well you did. It felt like this place that was separate from the rest of the world, and not to mention it was literally called the Extra Room. There was something magical about that. Well, no, that's the wrong word. There was something alluring, I guess. It felt like the place where the cool kids hung out. It felt like the place where you could only get our kinds of experiences here. Oh, and did I mention 4 has all of the Bowser minigames? He just comes stomping down on you out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden, hey guys, you're battling to keep all of your coins and not get torched. Oh yeah, not quite as bad as he was back in the day, but still. At any given time, you're just praying that he doesn't show up. Yeah, collectively, I've spent so much time in every single one of these games that it just feels unfair to choose one over the others. I love them all equally for different reasons. Like, I've spent just as much time in that extra room as I have riding down the minigame coaster. I've spent just as much time on the Eternal Star trying to unlock that board to begin with as I have trying to fight the Millennium Star and get all of the different minigames and collect coins and just... I've had so many Mario parties that I've played. So many good times. Why play favorites? They're all fun. They're all great. It's a series that just keeps bringing me joy no matter how many years go by, and yeah. I'm not gonna lie, to this very day, I keep hoping that the next one they release is gonna be just as fun as the ones I remember. Well, this is a bit of an unusual situation, isn't it? Before we start here, I just want to say I did not mean for all three of the Mario games to show up right next to each other. It just kind of happened to work out that way. And it's also kind of strange for me to put this one so close to the top 8, especially after I spent a huge chunk of the Super Mario World video and Freedom Planet talking about how I really don't like the modern structure of platformers. The fact that there's a great level in there, but you gotta stop every minute or so to focus your efforts on a collectible or something. So, I mean, it looks good, it plays good, there is some great level design when you're not being slowed down by said collectibles, and it's got some fantastic music, even in the vein of Mario. This is a really high bar to set, but no, that would not be enough to push it up to the top. No, the sole reason this game is so high up, the one thing that makes me hold it in as high regard as I do, is because of my little sister. She and I played through the entirety of this game. I don't mean just going up to the credits, like beating the final Bowser fight. No, we went way beyond that. We went all the way into the extra stage. We unlocked Rosalina. We got every single golden flagpole, every single coin. We collected everything you could possibly get and found every single shortcut leading to every single place. We even found all of the warp pipes together. That's how thoroughly we explored this game. The one thing we did not do together was Champions Road. We were so close. We were so close to beating that level. I haven't even watched videos of this level. That's how... like... We got to the final challenge, that thing where you're running around trying to grab all of the coins with those booster pads and you have to dodge the shockwaves and everything. I got so frustrated at that level, I literally punched a hole in my door. Not my smartest moment by far, but for some reason I just never came back to it. And I can make 101 different excuses as to why we never finished that level together. It was up to me. Like, the only way she was interested in playing those levels again is if I was playing the game with her. Like, I'd lend her the console, I'd give her the ability to play it, but she'd always lose interest. And looking back, I can kind of understand why. The more time that's between now and when I did it, the more I appreciate the fact that she was willing to play that game with me, because in a lot of ways, she reminded me of myself at that age. Look, nobody's family is perfect, but she was not getting what she needed in that house from anybody else. I was the only one who was willing to do things with her, and even then it was occasional. I was so blind. I was so I feel it's equatable to how a parent feels when they realize they didn't spend enough time with their child. They only got one chance. They only got one ability to appreciate all of that time they spent with this person during their formative years. The more I look back on it, the more I regret all of the things I said about the game. The more I realize how much fun I was actually having, how much I appreciated the fact that she was there and she was willing to give me some kind of social interaction at a time where I had none. I think back to that time, to all of the close calls we had, all of the times I guided her through, like us figuring out which characters we liked, figuring out puzzles together, working together, those times when we were carrying each other, like she'd hold power-ups and find things for me. We'd collect coins, we'd climb walls looking for secrets, we'd do all of these things, and for some reason I felt like I just wasn't happy enough because I wasn't working on videos at the time. I have not sold that console. Did you know that? I have not sold my Wii U or my copy of that game, in the faint hopes that one of these days when I go back to visit my family down there, I'd be able to bring them by and maybe we'd complete our love for this game finally. Maybe we'd be able to finally do what we always set out to do. And maybe this time I'd approach it with a brand new mindset. This time I'd remember to actually show the fact that I'm enjoying myself. If you're watching this, I don't want to say your name because I don't want to embarrass you, but if you are watching this, God, I'm sorry. Thank you for being there. This is not a joke. This is not me being facetious at all, kiddo. I miss you. I miss you so much. And I can't wait to see you again when I come out there. Soon. Hopefully soon. Hey, you know what's a word that really gets overused by game reviewers when they're describing something they played? Charming. Charming just seems to be that placeholder for that feeling where you don't know how to describe why you love something, you just love it. It's this all-encapsulating feeling of this is cute, or it's adorable, or it made me smile, or all three of the above. And that's how I think I'd describe Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and more. It's just where I'd start. That is what kept me going. Like, I had played other Final Fantasy games before, Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IX being them, and it was gonna be hard-pressed to top 9. But the more I look back on it, the more that initial reaction wasn't quite on point. That feeling of apprehension is like, whoa, this is strange and odd, and I'm not sure if I like this. But I did. The more I got into it, the more I played, the more of that world I experienced, the more I realized that this is probably my favorite Final Fantasy game, even though I had absolutely nobody to play it with. That's a really big detriment, too. Like, this game is designed to be played with other people. It's almost like Triforce Heroes in the sense that you are missing out on a big part of what makes it so special if you don't have other people. It ignited this feeling in me. I wanted to find people. I asked all my friends at the time, hey, would you like to come by my house and play this game? And sadly, nobody seemed interested. And I've got no idea why, honestly. Like, will you look at what's in this strategy guide? Let's just flip through these pages here. Okay, we've got all kinds of... There are details about, like, creating your character, You can be one of 4 different races. You can play as a boy or a girl. You can choose the profession of your family. They can have all kinds of different things they do in this world, which actually affects the resources that are available to you, which items you're going to be looking for. There are different random events you can encounter as the years go on. This is a role-playing game. This is what an RPG actually looks like. That's it, distilled to its essence. It ignited in me as a child the feeling of it's that nerdy feeling of wanting to get together with a bunch of other people and escape the real world, to play a role. This was my Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. At least I wanted it to be. This is a world I got utterly and totally absorbed in, and I think it helped. More than the fact that it felt like this was my story more than anything else. The fact that this world was, well, just so charming. The soundtrack is one of my absolute favorites, period. And considering what we've seen so far on this list, that is a really, really big statement. But I love the simple instruments. I love that opening song, the English version. I've heard the Japanese version and it's just not the same. I love those sort of Celtic instruments, I guess you describe them as, that sort of Highlands feel to it. It's a setting that doesn't feel like other games. It has this something to it. It has this aesthetic, I guess you describe it. It doesn't look like other games. It doesn't feel like other games. It has this, even the bog standard, like, green riverway you go through. 1, that has the element of water going for it. 2, it has this mist covering it. It has this allure, this mystery, this feeling like you don't know what's going to come next. And then there's the premise, the very concept of the game itself. You're not some chosen warrior who has to save the entire world, who has the blood of ancients coursing through their veins. At least, I don't think it gets to that point. I never actually beat the game. Found myself lacking motivation without other people. But you are just a kid. You are a warrior from a village. It's not so much the planet you're trying to save as much as your little piece of it. The people who are close to you, your family members who give you that shop, who give you those resources that help you do this adventuring thing a lot better than you could otherwise, that write to you while you're on the road and send you items. These are the guys whose fate is on your shoulders when you go out to collect these droplets of myrrh, it's called, so you can purify the crystal that keeps your town safe from the mist, the miasma, the thing that just wrecks, destroys the rest of the world where the crystals are not. Life is not safe from this stuff, and you're just doing your best to survive in a world that is surprisingly harsh when you get down to it, and yet surprisingly lighthearted at the same time. Plus there's lore. I found so much lore just from the descriptions you get when you go to an area for the first time. It feels simultaneously like you're having a story read to you, like you're going on an adventure, like you're listening to, like you're traveling to across the ocean to another culture that you've never seen before. This game hit me with so many surprises, so many things I had never seen, heard, or felt. And it just stuck with me. For years and years and years, it stuck with me. One of these days, I want to play through the entirety of this game with 3 other members of Team Pizza. I want to record that, I want to stream it, I want to do whatever. It's going to happen. I don't know when, but I am going to convince these guys to do it with me. That is a promise I can keep to you guys. Don't hold me to when, though. I don't want this to be another RTG's 25. Oh yeah, this was inevitable. Shantae was going to show up somewhere. You guys even called this in the comments because I make no secret of my love for this series. I've still got my original cartridge for the first entry. It's the most valuable anything I own, and I am never, ever selling it. As much childhood attachment as I have for this thing, though, I've always said that every new Shantae game is a quantum leap ahead of the last, because that's always been the case. I even thought the tradition had continued when Half Genie Hero came out. But now that it's no longer new, and I've had some time to reflect and let that game settle in my mind, I realize the always better than the last rule only used to be true. Yes, Half Genie Hero was fantastic and well made and gorgeous to look at and fixed most of the problems with the dancing mechanic, all the ones they could anyway, and we haven't even seen all the DLC yet for the extra playable characters and costumes, and God, it's great. But if I had to choose just one game in the series to play right now, it would be Pirate's Curse. I love this game for the same reason I love Mario Galaxy 1 over its more polished sequel, the same reason I prefer Kingdom Hearts 1 to the technically and mechanically superior second entry. These games may have more to them in general, but the original has more where it counts. Kingdom Hearts 1 is much more Disney than Square Enix, whereas the sequel is the opposite. Mario Galaxy 2 has more stars and levels, but it loses the observatory and the general magic of the first game. Rosalina doesn't even show up until the end, what gives? Well, my bedtime story. And in that same vein, Pirate's Curse is a treat for fans of the series, because it's not just about Shantae, it's also about everyone else around her. There's so much heart in this game. So many cool moments like Poe's apology, the relationship that starts to unfold between Sky and Barracuda Joe, and the surprisingly humanizing moments that let you see the other side of the titular pirate, forcing you to realize that there's a person underneath all of that. It's almost disappointing playing Half Genie Hero after this, because you remember what those two went through together. And yet, in the next game, they're right back where they were before like nothing happened. Yes, some of this is played for laughs, but even then, it's done in such a way that you leave feeling like you know these people better than you did before. The writing here is just spot on from beginning to end. It's probably the funniest and most heartfelt the series has ever been. It has my favorite dialogue exchange in any video game, and if you want to see it, go back to Uncle Mimic's workshop after beating Tan Line Island and talk to Bolo. It's hilarious and sad and reveals so much about both the characters involved in it and the dynamic between them. All of it is like that in this game. You really get a sense of who these people are, what's going on in their head, and their relationships to one another from the way their dialogue unfolds. And think about that. These characters, who I've been following for 2 games now and already loved, are suddenly opening up and having things happen to them. Shantae has always been big on fan service, and in my opinion, Pirate's Curse knocks it out of the freaking park. That's because this is the good kind, the meaningful kind that rewards you for following along with the franchise for so long and being a part of this universe. Even the soundtrack gets in on the act, blending old favorites with brand new classics like Rave in the Grave. And that strong sense of nostalgia is weird because the gameplay is the biggest departure from series tradition they could have possibly done. To explain, Shantae doesn't have her genie magic anymore at this point in the story. That means no transformations, which was a downright iconic part of the character up to that point. Instead, you have to travel the world hunting down pieces of Risky's arsenal. So instead of fireballs, now you're shooting bullets. Instead of summoning storm puffs, you're charging through an entire room full of enemies with a scimitar. And although that has way less flavor than turning into a mermaid, it's so immediately satisfying from a mechanical standpoint that the community is still going back and forth on whether or not Shantae is better off without her powers. The decision only becomes harder the further you get into this game, when you start unlocking items like the scimitar and the ability to glide, the cannon which gives you extra jumps, and Man, the way all of those tools can be combined with each other just feels so good. And they actually test you on that if you want to collect everything. But that's just not who the character is. It flies in the face of the very concept of Shantae and robs her of one of her most defining features. But it's so much better from a gameplay standpoint. Let's see, stopping dead in my tracks every couple of seconds to dance and turn into a sexy monster girl, or having smooth action-packed gameplay. Swords, spiders, hats, harpies. You are tearing me apart way forward. It also doesn't help that Half-Genie Hero lacks free roaming and traditional dungeons, which themselves were also a staple up until that point, and yeah, I gotta admit, without that openness and that sense of freedom you get from being able to seamlessly transition between dancing through danger and shopping in town, something just feels off, especially compared to the wondrous locations you visit in Pirate's Curse. Tell me you didn't have a fanboy freak out the first time you went through the Village of Lost Souls. The Metroidvania formula that got most of us hooked on these games to begin with is at its most defined and polished in Pirate's Curse, with tons of goodies to discover and secrets that will genuinely leave you stumped, all encouraging me to examine more carefully a world I've been begging to dive deeper into for years now. What it comes down to is this. Why would you shrink the world down when the last game did such a good job of opening it up? Probably because Kickstarter doesn't give you the kind of money to make a game that big and this good looking. Unless your name is A Hat in Time, of course. I'll openly admit, it's not the prettiest, or the best received, or even the most technically impressive game in the series. But Pirate's Curse is absolutely the most satisfying Shantae. And at least in my book, that counts for a lot. I've thought long and hard about this. I felt like I had to. I kept telling myself, no, it's too new, don't jump to conclusions, don't heap so much praise on something that's still fresh in your mind. But 2 years later, I find myself still thinking the exact same thing I was when Undertale first came out. This is one of the best games I have ever played. The hard part about this is I can't tell you exactly why. Undertale is like Doki Doki Literature Club or Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. It's one of those games where the less you know about it going in, the better an experience you'll have. But I also can't just say that and call it a video, so let's see how good I really am at dodging spoilers. I guess I can tell you the premise, at least. You are a human. You fall into a world full of monsters that were banished underground long ago. And luckily for you, very few of them actually want to fight. The main conceit of Undertale is that with equal parts quick thinking and clever choices, you can get through the entire game without hurting or killing anybody. And past that, all bets are off. Developer Toby Fox has an almost terrifying level of understanding about human psychology. He used that to build a game that delights in surprising you and taking you off guard, of making you consider video games in a way you might not have before. Whether you realize it's happening or not, the game is dynamically reacting to you. It's tailoring itself to your playstyle in ways that become easier to appreciate the more you learn about it. The deeper you dive and the more layers you peel away, the more you come face to face with a game that understands exactly what it is and what your appearance in its world means. That level of self-awareness bleeds into every aspect of the design. It smashed the traditional turn-based combat system by turning enemy attacks into mini shmup segments. You could breeze through this whole game without taking a single point of damage if you were good enough. It understands where the fine line between explaining a story and letting the player make a story needs to be drawn. It's a game where choices matter and have long-term ramifications on everything you do moving forward. Again, in ways you may not be expecting. And it's a game that both celebrates and pokes fun at tropes from the genre it shares its very DNA with: JRPGs. Undertale is postmodernism, the video game. It feels like the next logical step, the evolution of ideas introduced to me when I was young. Just like how BanjoTooie and Super Mario World captured my imagination when I was just getting into games, Undertale is something that hit home with an older, wiser me. Someone who understood games much better and felt like they were never going to be shocked or moved or made to cry like they did back when they first fell in love with the art form. It captures that same sense of, I have no idea what's going to happen, that made games so appealing in the beginning. So if you're getting sick of me talking in vagaries this whole video, get used to it, because seeing this game unfold yourself, of actually being there and having it happen to you, is the entire point. Even the music captures this feeling. The soundtrack is full of catchy and memorable pieces that all base themselves on just a handful of melodies, thus ingraining themselves in your mind even more. And it worked. There are so many remixes and covers of these songs that Undertale is giving the Toho community a run for its money. But Toby also intentionally composed these tunes in a certain format, and drew this game the way he did in pixel art for a reason. Whereas most titles go to great lengths to create immersion through making you forget this is a game, for Undertale to work, you need to be consciously aware that you're playing a video game. It goes the opposite direction. It needs to set up that mental contrast of this is where we were and here's where we are now. It's something I feel started a trend that we're seeing more and more of these days. And honestly, I can't wait to see what we think of next. This should come as a surprise to literally no one. If you know me, even tangentially, you know about my love for Star Fox. Even back in my Super Nintendo days, this game had a power over me. I saw a single static screenshot of it in an issue of Nintendo Power, and it blew my mind. I had no idea what I was looking at. I didn't understand the difference between 2D and 3D, I just knew that this was unlike anything I had ever seen. And that Christmas, I got it. My mom and dad found a used copy for me at Bookman's, and it still stands as one of my favorite gifts ever. Thanks, guys. But new hardware means new horizons. It means 64 bits instead of just 16. It meant all of Nintendo's old franchises were about to become legendary, and Star Fox was no exception. This isn't just one of my favorite games ever. I believe that objectively, Star Fox 64 is one of the greatest games of all time. But not this version. Look, I know this is gonna piss off some purists, but I'm sorry guys, I like the 3DS remake better. There are more modes, the soundtrack has been remastered, and the Lilat system itself has never looked better. Yeah, it took me a while to get used to the new voice actors, but I like them. I can't imagine these lines any other way now. This is what the original is like in my memory. It's what Star Fox 64 looks like through rose-colored glasses. But don't misunderstand, there's a reason it deserved a remake at all. Star Fox 64 is the full package. It's a game that wastes no time introducing you to an entire galaxy of incredible characters who set the stage for an action-packed space opera. These stages may be on rails, but they are anything but boring. I don't think there's a single dull moment in Star Fox 64. There's always something happening, always another goal to chase or enemy to shoot. Even the quieter moments are used to build up tension and anticipation for what's coming next. And thanks to the branching path system that rewards skillful play with new unexplored stages, you're not just along for the ride. Your actions have a direct say in how this all plays out, and I just love that. It makes you feel like a part of this universe, and it's a great balance between showing the player the best parts of your world while still giving them enough control and challenge to justify making this a video game instead of a movie. And oh, the things you will see. From the skies above Corneria City to the depths of the ocean and even the surface of the sun, you'll be blasting through asteroids, fighting off an entire enemy armada, and battling bosses so huge they cover the screen. Look at this stage. This is freaking bedlam, and it's awesome. And the warps. Let me tell you about these. Hidden behind not necessarily obvious requirements, the first time I stumbled upon one of these was a complete shock. The sudden shift in tone and aesthetic and level of difficulty blew me away. I'd never seen anything like that in a game before, and the fact that absolutely nobody mentioned it in the next stage left me unsure how I was supposed to feel about what just happened. This is the best game in the series, and if I'm being brutally honest, it's the best one we're ever going to get. Modern day Nintendo is simply incapable of making a better Star Fox than this. Heck, they can't even make one that's as good. Not even close. Not as long as they're committed to never releasing a new game without changing something drastic, as if that's some magic bullet to game design. But I've come to terms with that, because this is a game I never get tired of playing. In that sense, it joins the ranks as one of my favorite pieces of media ever, in any format. I enjoy flying through these stages like I enjoy watching Aladdin or Fievel Goes West. I enjoy fighting these bosses like I enjoy listening to Frou Frou and her hauntingly beautiful voice. No matter how planned out my routes are, or how much I'm guided by muscle memory, I still have just as much fun playing Star Fox 64 now as I did many years ago. Mission accomplished, Argonaut. This is gonna sound really weird, so bear with me. Do you have a gaming safe space? Like, the one game you can always fall back on that no matter what, will always make you feel good when you play it. For me, that is Harvest Moon 64. I first played this when I was visiting my grandparents for the summer one year, and I got so lost in the simple process of running my farm that I barely left my room. But before we get any further, there's something I want to make very clear, a misconception that I want to correct. Farming is not the only thing you do. Yes, that is the core that everything else is based around, but there's so much more that goes into making a good Harvest Moon game that simply referring to it as a farming simulator is completely missing the point. The people are what make Harvest Moon Harvest Moon. Their personalities, the stories they have to tell, and the way they slowly open up to you as you get to know them is one of the main reasons that establishing a daily routine and slowly building up your farm is worth it. Not to mention that some of these relationships can eventually blossom into love. It's weird, but it works. When one of the characters told me she would have appreciated gifts of milk and eggs, it motivated me to save up for and raise a cow. Whenever I saw Karen up in the mountains, I was sure to give her some berries or flowers, because watching her warm up to me and give me new dialogue that wasn't just her being harsh and standoffish was immensely satisfying. Far more so than the extra 40G I would have made by selling that item instead. It's subtle here, but this is something Stardew Valley explicitly states. The Harvest Moon formula is at its strongest when it's acting as a place to escape to, when it's giving you that realm where you can get away from life for a while so you can take things at your own pace and hang out with some very pleasant people. And as much as I love Stardew and the myriad things you can do in that game, I grew up in Mineral Town. There will be times where I legitimately miss the people here, times when I get the urge to rush back into this game and spend hours reacquainting myself with old friends. Stardew doesn't have that. It doesn't have the music box. It doesn't have the Firefly Festival. Stardew doesn't have Ellie. I mean, come on, she bakes, she's wearing an apron, and she has short brown hair. This woman was a perfect storm for me. You want to meet my #1 video game waifu? This is it. Quite literally, I married her. Chasing a girl's heart is only one side of the game, though. You're always chasing a new dream in Harvest Moon 64, and when you accomplish one, chances are there's another goal right around the corner. Are you saving up for an animal, or trying to get your hands on a house extension? Are you building up your horse to dominate at the races, or raising the world's most impressive field of crops? Are you beating back romantic rivals, or trying to woo the local goddess into doing you some favors? Or most likely, you're doing all of them at once. And then events start to unfold in the world. Other characters have lives and dreams of their own, which you can become involved in if you get to know them well enough. And these are some of the coolest moments in the game, letting your hard work and care pay off in some truly satisfying ways. Appropriately enough, Harvest Moon 64 is a game that you will get more out of the more you put into it. There is nothing more satisfying than using this footage to go over how my farm looked at the beginning of spring to seeing how developed it was as early as mid-summer. To look back over all the accomplishments I'd made and still know there was much work left to be done. I have not even begun to play this game, despite the countless hours I've put into it already. And when I look at that title screen and stare off into that endless field with that comforting music playing, I realize I don't think I'll ever truly be finished. I see you there. You're waiting for the moment where I reveal that this was all set up for some elaborate joke. For me to go, nah, just kidding, it's actually BioShock or Ocarina of Time or something. It ain't happening. These games are legit and I will hear no arguments to the otherwise. Okay, to explain, I was talking to my mom on the phone not too long ago, in the middle of this marathon actually, and she helped me realize that I actually got something wrong in one of my previous videos. Beauty and the Beast is indeed one of my earliest gaming memories, but the only reason I was so interested in whether or not our computer at home had games is because the computers at my kindergarten also did. I remember this so clearly, my first day at school. That's back when the Asperger's was in full swing. I had no idea what was going on around me at any given time. My brain was just too busy. There was one thing I locked in on. One thing that made sense. During break, the teacher brought me over to the computers and booted up a game for me to play. And what popped on screen was this. That's it. Right there. My first ever video game in 6 words. The Learning Company presents Midnight Rescue. I was 5 years old. In fact, the Learning Company is a name I would become really familiar with really quickly, because they pretty much defined my PC gaming habits until I was like 11 or 12. Gizmos and Gadgets, Treasure Mountain, Treasure Math Storm, Logical Journey of the Zoombinis, Reader Rabbit, The Clue Finders, I can't even hold all of these awesome games. I played the Treasures series into oblivion, Math Storm specifically. That early exposure is probably why I have a fondness for ice levels, come to think of it. You were finding presents, counting crystals, learning about time, and it all taught you the finer points about numbers along the way. They even made you count out your coins when buying items from the shop. It's little things like that. Reader Rabbit felt like a blast because that was a journey. It was a road trip across a fantastic yet oddly familiar land, filled with fun stories and just some of the most downright pleasant characters you'll ever meet. Logical Journey of the Zoombinis was amazing because instead of making you fiddle around with math or any of that boring stuff, it taught you a crucial skill most of us seem to be lacking these days: how to think logically. All of the challenges in this game are process of elimination puzzles that require you to organize, memorize, and strategically place your little blue buddies to keep them from meeting certain doom. All wrapped up in a beautifully dark world with music so near and dear to my heart that I have the map transition theme as my ringtone. Yeah, you better believe that when they announced they were funding a mobile port on Kickstarter, I threw my money down immediately. And can you blame me? This might just be the best game the Learning Company has ever made. It has clever puzzles, gorgeous art, a fascinating world, and... Please? But... Oh, actually, scratch that. Clue Finders might be a little better. Those games chronicled a team of legitimately cool older kids that traveled the world and solved mysteries. And they didn't test you on just one area of study like the games before it. Oh no, they were the full package. If you beat Clue Finders, you were pretty much set for the whole school year they were attached to. It made those days in class so much easier. They were full of huge set-piece moments with creative puzzles and awesome characters, and seriously, what is my deal with redheads? And this isn't even taking into account all the other amazing educational games I played in that time, like Jumpstart 3rd Grade, Oregon Trail, Carmen Sandiego, Math Blaster, ages 9 to 12, and a little title called Math for the Real World, which was so good, I'm not even gonna talk about it because it deserves its own episode. All of these games deserve their own episodes. That's why I couldn't choose just one, because they all hit me during that wonderful period of discovery and, yes, learning. I'm honestly struggling to explain where these games stand with me. It's a feeling even stronger than nostalgia. When I see them, I feel like a burden has been lifted, like my body gets lighter and anything that's going wrong at that moment in time doesn't matter anymore. I just have too many happy memories here. I gave countless hours of my time to these games, and this is the important part, they gave something back. Something tangible, something useful, something I could carry into the real world that helped me move forward in life, and that's a kind of mutual relationship you just don't find in most games. These are pure games to me. I had absolutely no expectations, experiences, or previous biases to shape and color how I experienced them. They were my first introduction to the art form, and they set a standard that I'm gonna be holding all my own projects to in the future when I build up enough of a nest egg to develop games too. Yes, they influenced me that much. Alone, any of them are amazing at what they do, but together, collectively, these titles literally changed my life. Do I need more of a reason to put them here? I know. I'm just as surprised as anybody. I thought for the longest time that this was my favorite game of all time. I even said as much on numerous occasions. But as I sat down and really started to hash this list out, I came to the realization that might not be the case. I think? Maybe? Look. I've been going back and forth on this game's position for a while now, even in the middle of producing these videos. We're at the point in this list where organizing these games into which ones I like more is not only next to impossible, but it almost feels pointless. This far up in a list this personal, all you're going to find is 3 games that I love equally as much for completely different reasons. And in the case of Dark Cloud 2, that reason is how utterly complete the game is. There is so much to Dark Cloud 2, so much to do and so much to experience that it makes me wonder how other games can even pretend to have depth and complexity. A playthrough of this game will run you over 100 hours, and right up until the final boss and even into the post-game, I was still being surprised and still working towards some new personal goal that I had not yet accomplished. This game was years ahead of its time in terms of ambition, and the crazy thing is, none of its cool ideas and game-changing mechanics feel half-baked. Every single thing the devs set out to do not only works, but excels. Take the weapon synthesis mechanic. Your characters don't level up in this game, their weapons do, and every time your weapon levels up, you get something called synthesis points. Synthesize with what, you may ask? And the answer is, just about anything you want. Every single item in the game not necessary to story progression can be broken down into its essence and fused into your weapons to boost their stats. And once you get enough stats in certain categories, your weapon can morph into a bigger and better form with even better numbers, more potential for faster growth, and sometimes even new properties. The dinky little battle wrench you start the game with may very well be the same weapon you wield into the final chapter, and that makes it so incredibly satisfying to me, because you weren't given this weapon. You didn't pick it off some uber boss's corpse or get it for completing a meaningless side quest for somebody you'd barely even known up to that point. No, you earned this. This thing has become just as much of a character to you as any of the people, and after so much time and energy, it's finally become something legendary. Don't worry about feeling the grind when it comes to this either. Even if you decide to hang back and stockpile experience for a bit, the layout of the various dungeons is never set in stone. They're made from tiles, much like The Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon. And much like those games, Dark Cloud 2 can be surprisingly unforgiving at times. You can make a few mistakes, but not many. Enemies hit so hard, and it will take you so long to get defense and maximum health boosts that learning the tells and patterns of the monsters you encounter becomes an absolute must. I'm not even being sarcastic. I think my early exposure to this game is why I did so well in Dark Souls. It taught me to be patient, to be observant, to hang back and consider all my options, to press every advantage I could get and wait for just the right moment to fight back. Nothing feels more gratifying than when you start winning this game. Because as corny as it sounds, you end up evolving at the same rate your gear does. You start hitting harder and learning how to hit more consistently at around the same time, and even at that point, there's still more ways you can push yourself. Every room in every dungeon comes preloaded with special challenges that ask you to do things like beat the whole floor without healing, or only damage and kill enemies with Monica's sword, that kind of thing. There are even rooms that have a seal on them the first time you enter, meaning you can only use one of your two characters, so you can never get comfortable. You can't ignore the other person. This is a journey for them both, and you're going to have to play around with, upgrade, and master each of their playstyles to succeed. You're encouraged to experiment in that sense. Maybe you buy another base weapon and take it down a totally different upgrade path, and then you discover that this new weapon handles completely differently and has its own combos and feel, and suddenly, all that time you spent becomes worth it. Or you can just summon a robot, whatever you feel like. Oh, and did I mention this game has time travel? The reason you're going through these monster-infested labyrinths to begin with is because you're up against a villain that's been erasing key figures from the future by messing with the present. You have to undo the damage he did by collecting items known as geostones and using the power contained within them to rebuild what's been lost. That includes building houses, recruiting wayward souls from your hometown to move into said houses, and building a veritable town with enough culture to attract trade and residency for years to come. Your eyes do not deceive you. We are now playing Level 5's take on Sim City. So to recap, you go into dungeons where your weapon naturally evolves as you fight. As you get stronger, you collect stones that allow you to customize an entire landscape to your liking, which in turn, when done right, unlocks powerful new items in the future, as well as story-specific events and a narrative that will hit you right in the heart with its twists, turns, and reveals, which just motivate you to go into even more dungeons to see how this all plays out. And that still isn't everything this game does that's amazing. I can't even scratch the surface of this game in the time I have to tell you about it in this video. Not if you actually want it released on the 23rd. Let's just go down the checklist of major things this game lets you do. You get to wield swords, hammers, guns, and magic, all of which can be built up and enhanced however you like. You can pilot your own customizable battle bot, recruit dozens of different characters to your team Suikoden style, invent new items that you can craft whenever you like, turn into a monster that slowly evolves into an even bigger and badder monster, play interdimensional golf, complete bonus objectives in areas you've already cleared for medals that can be traded in for alternate costumes, travel through time, build entire villages to your liking, go fishing, and then race the fish you caught against other people's fish for cash and prizes. My God, what else could you possibly want? That's why Dark Cloud 2 is so much fun to not just pick up and play, but also continue playing. It keeps hitting you with cool new mechanic after cool new mechanic. No joke, today's episode almost didn't happen because I was having trouble putting the game down long enough to write a script. It was so easy to tell myself, just one more thing, I'll get one more level for my sword so I can evolve it and then I'm done. Ooh, actually, let me turn in those geostones I got while doing this and see what I unlock for the building mode. Oh, yes! More unlock conditions! Let me just put those into place, go into the future, reap the rewards, and... Wait, what time is it? Oh, snap, it's 5 p.m. Words! I am stunned, just floored that more people have not played this game, that I don't hear more people hailing this as one of the greatest games of all time. For the time it came out in, on the platform it was on, and the hardware it had to work with, this is a marvel. This is a standard that we can hold even modern games to. It's so feature complete that even if the rumors of a Dark Cloud 3 are untrue, I think I'd still walk away just as satisfied and happy as I would be even with it. That's how good this game is. Go play this right now. Whenever I'm writing a game review, there is one word I am very careful with. Perfect. Because to say something is perfect means that it's infallible, that nothing anybody could ever add or take away from that thing would make it better. Those are pretty strong implications. There are very few things human beings have made in general that fall under that criteria. But in my opinion, Gitaroo Man is a 100% perfect game. Music is practically a part of my soul, man. I don't think there's been a moment since I was young that some song or another wasn't playing in my head at any given time. To see a game get music so right, even when compared to other rhythm games I was playing at the time like Rez and DDR Extreme 2, hit me in a way I can never let go. This goes far beyond having a good soundtrack, or even a great one. Every song in this game is not only vastly different in terms of composition and tone, but it manages to bring so much out of the theme it aims for and the instruments it uses that you can only describe these pieces as masterful. That wasn't even on purpose when I wrote that. It is my favorite video game soundtrack, hands down. And it stands as an example of why I love cartoons and cel-shaded aesthetics. because the only way this game got away with having all the types of music it did is by setting them in a universe where anything could happen. And anything does happen, which is part of what makes Gitaroo Man so much fun. This game redefines over the top. It gets so insane at times you'd think it was developed by Studio Trigger. And it works, not only because of how much it commits itself to doing whatever it wants, but also because U1, our main protagonist, is just as confused by it all as we are. His reactions are priceless. There's this one moment in Stage 3 that never fails to crack me up. Watch this.
Get ready.
Look at that face. That is the expression of, I just found out my dog can talk, finished a guitar duel with a demon, fought off a UFO that blasted me with fat beats, and now I'm in the middle of a swamp having a funk off with a black guy in a bee suit for the fate of the entire universe. I quit. I have officially given up trying to make sense of any of this. And that relatability is what sells how high these stakes are sometimes. You really do feel like the entire universe is hanging in the balance because you are this guy, not just because your hands are on the controller. See, Gitaroo Man had another advantage in my case: timing. I played it at a point in my life where it would have hit home the hardest. Those were the days of high school and discovering who I really was. In that vulnerable and confusing time, I needed a story like this. I needed to watch this awkward little goof rise up and become a hero in his own right. Let's be real here. In some ways, all of us were U1 at some point. We've doubted ourselves. We've had moments in this strange world run by evil adults that forced us to grow up and become better people for it. And developer Innes managed to wrap up what that's like in a package so filled with the power of anime that it could only have come from Japan. Not that I could articulate any of that to you at the time. This game actually reminds me of Fooly Cooly in that sense, which I was watching it around the same time and portrays a lot of the same messages. I didn't understand it back then, but I totally got it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I couldn't understand why, but I empathized with this kid on a level that felt all too personal at the time. I had to deal with bullies from first grade all the way up through middle school. I wanted so badly to see U1 be happy, and if you know the drill with this medium, you know that I got my wish. That's part of why I love video games, and it's a lesson I've carried into the real world. When you buy a game, you enter a silent pact with the developer that if you try hard enough, if you make the right choices, and if you put in the effort and time, you will get your happy ending. Without games drilling that concept into my head, I don't know how I would have survived my formative years and found the willpower to overcome my failings. But I'm glad I did, and I'm glad that this was the game that helped me do it. Playing Gitaroo Man during that time was much like listening to instrumental music. Even if I couldn't put into words what was going on, I understood exactly what was happening. And that is something I can only describe as perfect. If you want a game guaranteed to put a smile on your face, designed from the ground up to lift your spirits, that is practically radiating positivity from every fiber of its being, look no further than the Elite Beat Agents games. Which one? all of them, every single one. That includes Elite Beat Agents, Os Tatake Wendon, and Os Tatake Wendon 2. I remember seeing commercials for this during the morning news in middle school. I had played other rhythm games up to that point, but never one with music I actually recognized. They had me sold at Walkie Talkie Man. Not to mention I needed something to round out my DS collection. What I got was the most gleefully silly and yet unabashedly awesome game I'd ever played. Any game whose story is about a government agency that hires professional cheerleaders to perk people up in times of crisis is already doing something right. Normal people like you and me, and also dogs and Leonardo da Vinci sometimes, with relatable problems like babysitting and corporate espionage and fighting off an alien invasion that hates music. Did I mention this game is awesome? But hold your horses, cowboy! From the east comes a new challenger! I didn't find out about Os until high school, and despite the, let's call it antagonistic elitism of the guy showing me his fancy imported games, my initial reaction was pure unbridled joy that there was more of these. I think it's a testament to how well designed these games are that I can enjoy them without a single bit of English dialogue. Based on the art and music alone, I could tell exactly what was going on in every single one of these missions. And considering that music wasn't designed specifically for these games, that is an achievement by itself. And so is getting good enough at the game to unlock the higher difficulties and being able to play as the girls. You want a bit of a challenge in your rhythm game? You one of those guys that proudly boasts about your position on the high score table at your local DDR machine? Boy, has this game got you covered. But after you fail a few times and watch those horrendously disappointing failure animations, seeing how incredibly far that person's fate goes in the opposite direction when you win is elating. You feel downright triumphant when the newscaster lady gets to go on that picnic with her son, or when Romancing Meowzilla becomes a smash hit movie. And again, the songs they chose to back up these stories just makes the good times that much good. Yeah. Fast tempos, catchy lyrics, and positive undertones round out this catalog. Save for that one level anyway, and I'm not crying, my eyes are expelling excess testosterone. Even though I said earlier that I love the games from these last 3 videos equally, it just made sense to put this series in the honorary #1 spot, because it was practically designed for me. They're rhythm games, they have amazing licensed soundtracks, they're colorful, cartoony, legitimately funny in how frenetic they are, and they do not give a flying front flip about your realism. The first Os game ends with the cheer squad pumping up the entire world so much that the positive vibes create a feel-good laser powerful enough to blast an apocalypse-sized meteor out of the sky. And believe it or not, the sequel tops that. All of those reasons would be enough for this series to be in my list already. But there's one more thing that gives them the edge. The one thing that makes me love them with all my heart and soul. Think about what the agents actually do. Unlike normal superheroes, they don't solve people's problems for them. They help those people figure out how to solve it themselves, and as it turns out, they can solve it themselves. The targets of their missions always had what it took, and that is the best possible message you could send. I live my life by the Mewtwo principle, that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. I firmly believe that every single person on Earth has within them the potential for greatness. But tragically, some people don't even realize what they can do. That's where those that love you come into play. Humans are social animals by nature. We just can't do this life thing alone. But with the right guidance, support, and encouragement, we can accomplish anything we set our minds to. The job of the Elite Beat agents and the cheer squad is to be that for people who have no one else. To be that guiding voice at a crucial turning point that helps people reach their true potential and ultimately end up somewhere better than when they started. It's something so easy to take for granted, and yet so powerful that it can literally change someone's life. For that reason, the Elite Beat agents are my favorite characters in all of gaming. They are heroes in a way I've never seen done in any other form of entertainment before or since. So no matter what's going on with you right now, I want you to know something. Hang in there, because it gets better. It always gets better so long as you keep trying to make it so. And you should, because you deserve to be happy. You are just as important as anyone else, because you have something to give that no one else can. Something amazing that the world would be legitimately lesser off without. Maybe no one's ever told you that, or maybe they have, but you just don't believe it yet. Well, I believe it, because you're here. Because right now, what you're doing by watching this video is giving me what I need to keep doing this. Whether you just found me, watched this whole series from day one, or been a subscriber since I did a camcorder LP of Okamiden years ago. Whether you like my videos, leave some kind of insightful words in the comments, or are even one of those individuals that decides to support me through donations on Patreon, Twitch, or wherever, you guys make this all worth it. So in turn, I wish nothing but the best for you. I hope, with all my heart, that either now or by your own making in the future, you are just as happy doing whatever you do as I am doing this. Thank you so much.
I did it!